My name is Karen, and I'm 33 years old. I have a family of 3, my husband, William, who is the same age as me, and our 3-year-old daughter, Evelyn. William's family runs a tutoring center. Both his parents were teachers, and he also has a teaching license. They are well educated and financially comfortable. Sometimes, I can't believe I'm part of such a family. At first, my parents and friends were worried about me, but there was no need. William's family is really kind and welcoming, even though I'm more of an athlete, and quite different from them. They accepted me with open arms. My mother-in-law was especially happy to have a daughter-in-law. I was nervous at first, but I decided to just be myself. I'm naturally cheerful and lively, so I built a good relationship with them over time. I'm a certified arborist, meaning I do health checks on trees, prune them, plant them, and move them around. I also offer consulting services. I worked hard to get my certification, and even though the job is physically demanding, I enjoy it. You need both knowledge and strength for this kind of work. I take care of my health and am strong for a woman. Currently, my husband works as a tutor in the family's tutoring center. He used to be an elementary school teacher. I first met him when I visited the school where he worked, for a meeting about tree care. After our daughter was born, I took parental leave but returned to work last year. Since our daughter is still young, I focus on my family. Thankfully, my workplace understands this. Sometimes, though, I can't make it in time to pick her up, and when that happens, my mother-in-law helps out, or my husband will pick her up if he can. I appreciate their support, and overall, my life has been fulfilling. But there is one person in my married life who causes me trouble, my sister-in-law, Sarah. She's married to William's brother, Richard, and they have a 5-year-old son. Richard is the oldest of William's 2 brothers. Sarah is mostly a housewife, but she also helps with the accounting and administration of the tutoring center. They are planning for their son to take an entrance exam for a private elementary school. From the first time I met Sarah at the in-laws' house, I knew she was a different kind of person. She is small, always dressed well, and her hair is always neat. I thought she was wonderful when I saw her smiling, but she has 2 sides to her personality. One time, when we were in the kitchen helping my mother-in-law, she left for a moment and then said to me, "Can't you do something about your appearance?" Sarah, who had been smiling, suddenly spoke in a completely different tone, and I thought she seemed like a different person. "You're always wearing clothes that look old and dirty. Don't you realize you're the only one who looks out of place here?" I'm embarrassed. I was a little surprised but replied, "Well, I find these clothes easy to move in. I have to chase after my daughter all the time because she's still little." Sarah sighed, as if she had more to say, but she stopped when she saw my mother-in-law coming back into the room. "What were you 2 talking about?" my mother-in-law asked. "Oh, we were just talking about our kids," Sarah quickly said with her usual sweet tone. She could change her attitude so fast. It was like she had a switch that turned on when my mother-in-law appeared. My mother-in-law nodded, as if to say, "Is that so?" And Sarah seemed happy with the answer. Even though I wasn't scared of Sarah, I didn't want to engage with her rude comments. I didn't want to upset my mother-in-law either. I know it's not unusual for people to have issues with their in-laws, so I thought I could handle it. After all, my mother-in-law has always been supportive of my career. Like a saint, I figured I could easily brush off Sarah's sarcastic remarks, but every time we saw each other, she would find new ways to put me down. One day, while I was out on a work errand, I bumped into Sarah. She was talking with some of her mom friends. We made eye contact, and I didn't want to be rude, so I said, "Hello, Sarah." She replied casually, "Oh, hi," and I moved on quickly since I was in a rush. But later that evening, she called my house. "What do you think you're doing?" she shouted at me, her voice full of anger. What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "Don't you ever approach me in public dressed like that," she yelled. "What's with your work outfit? I can't believe you'd walk around looking like that. Did you see us? You should at least try to look presentable, even if you don't have anything special going on. We're all moms here preparing our kids for private school entrance exams. We live in a different world from you." I was so embarrassed by her rude comments. I was wearing my work clothes because I had been working, so I replied, "I don't care about that. Just don't approach me when we meet outside, okay? It's embarrassing." She responded, "Isn't it even stranger? We're family, after all," she went on. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. You just don't fit into the family, and just so you know, I've never considered you a sister-in-law." Then she hung up the phone abruptly, leaving me shocked. She really went out of her way to call and express all her feelings. She often complains about me during family gatherings, but the worst part is, She only shows her true self when we're alone. Sarah prides herself on being a fashionable, high-class woman from a wealthy family. That's fine if she enjoys that lifestyle, but what I don't understand is why she feels the need to constantly attack me just because I don't fit into her idea of the perfect family member. Yes, she always dresses elegantly, even in sports clothes, but why does she need so many? I wonder if her quiet husband, my brother-in-law, knows how much she shops. Maybe he doesn't even realize this side of her. It's just who she is. I've kept quiet about all this to my brother-in-law and mother-in-law, but I did mention it to my husband because it was becoming a real source of stress for me. At first, he shrugged it off, saying she doesn't seem that bad, but a few days later, my mother-in-law called me about a family dinner coming up that weekend. She wanted to let me know the time and place. We all live about 30 minutes away from each other, and usually, she doesn't interfere with her son's lives. But she always insists on family gatherings for special occasions like my father-in-law's birthday, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. This time, it was to celebrate my father-in-law's birthday. She had reserved a private room at my father-in-law's favorite steakhouse. It would be our first time going there as a family, but the food is really good, and I was excited. I thanked her and told her I was looking forward to it, but deep down, I dreaded seeing Sarah again. "You don't sound very excited. Are you busy with work?" my mother-in-law asked, sensing my hesitation. "Oh, I'm fine, I'm perfectly fine," I quickly responded, trying to sound cheerful. I hoped I hadn't given away my true feelings. "If there's anything bothering you at home, please let me know," my mother-in-law said kindly. "I really appreciate all you do for us, even when work runs late." I was confused and didn't understand what she meant at first, but then the weekend arrived, and it was time for the dinner party. It was my father-in-law's birthday. A chance to show our gratitude. I promised myself I would celebrate happily and not let Sarah's comments bother me. I left home early and arrived at the restaurant's private room before anyone else. I was relieved to see that my father-in-law, mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and sister-in-law hadn't arrived yet. I came early to avoid keeping my father-in-law waiting on his special day, and also because the less time I spent with Sarah, the better. I hoped the dinner would go smoothly, but my brother-in-law and Sarah showed up right after I did. "Hello, hi Karen, Richard, it's nice to see you." We all exchanged greetings. After that, my husband and brother-in-law started talking, but Sarah immediately came over to me, looked me up and down, and sighed. "What are you wearing? For such a fancy restaurant, you could have at least dressed better," she said in a low voice, starting her usual demeaning comments. I forced a smile and replied, "Is this really the time or place for that? I thought about the occasion when I picked this dress. Is it inappropriate?" I said, "It's not from a high-end brand, but..." She interrupted, "It's surprising you could even show up in such a cheap outfit. You have broad shoulders for a woman, so this dress doesn't suit you. And your accessories, just a wedding ring? You never wear nail polish, either, and your hands look rough." I calmly explained, "I can't wear nail polish for my job." "Isn't it hard to do household chores with long nails?" she asked. "My job involves working with wood and soil, plus household chores. My hands get rough. But that's not a problem for me. I'm proud of my strong hands and shoulders. They're a sign of the hard work I do as a gardener," I responded, feeling upset by her comments. But Sarah wasn't finished. "I really can't stand you," she snapped. "I've been trying to help you out of kindness, but you never listen, and now you're resisting. It's unbearable being around someone like you. You don't belong in this family." Her voice grew louder, and it felt like she was losing control. "This is my father-in-law's celebration today. Please don't ruin it," I said, trying to stay calm. But Sarah shot back, "You're the one ruining everything. You don't belong here. I can't eat with someone as shabby as you. Go home, go home." "This dinner was organized by my mother-in-law, and you're the one ruining it," I said, standing my ground. "I'll listen to your complaints later, but not now." But Sarah shouted, "Don't you dare talk back to me. Didn't you hear me? I said go home. In fact, leave this family." As Sarah got louder, my husband started to walk over, but just then, the door to the private room opened. My mother-in-law entered, followed by my father-in-law and their youngest son, John. My mother-in-law quietly but firmly closed the door behind them. Seeing her, Sarah suddenly stopped. She seemed to remember where she was and what was happening. She stood there, speechless, her mouth opening and closing in surprise. "Everyone, please sit down," my mother-in-law said softly, but with authority. We all obeyed. "It seems we need to talk before we can enjoy the birthday celebration. I'm sorry for the interruption." My father-in-law nodded in agreement. Then, my mother-in-law turned to Sarah. Sarah, what did you say to Karen? She asked, her voice calm but sharp. Even my usually kind mother-in-law could be tough when needed. Sarah, now flustered, stammered, "Oh, I was just saying I'm looking forward to today's meal." But my mother-in-law raised an eyebrow. Did I hear wrong? I thought I heard you tell Karen to leave? Sarah quickly backpedaled. No, that was just a small argument, just a joke. Despite her attempt to smile, she was clearly still upset, but I couldn't help but be impressed by how she tried to regain her usual cheerful tone. A joke? My mother-in-law asked. What caused it? From what I heard, you were the one doing all the talking. Have you been treating Karen this way all this time? My mother-in-law, looking straight at Sarah, spoke with a calm but serious tone. I didn't bully her. I was just offering advice on manners and dress as a senior member of this household. That didn't sound like advice, my mother-in-law replied. Everyone should be free to wear what they want, as long as it's respectful. Karen wasn't dressed oddly, but you were criticizing her for wearing non-branded clothes at a high-end restaurant. Her makeup and accessories were minimal, but that's her choice. You shouldn't be embarrassed by what she wears. Suddenly, my mother-in-law raised her voice sharply, making both Sarah and me jump. The three brothers and my father-in-law remained calm, distracting the children with picture books, clearly used to my mother-in-law's anger when she was upset. No, Sarah, you're the one who should be embarrassed, my mother-in-law said. I've noticed something was off even at our family gatherings. I thought you were having friendly chats at first. Friendly? Yes, friendly chats, Sarah stammered, her expression desperate, but I refused to meet her gaze. For the record, Karen never complained about you. She kept quiet, hoping you would change your attitude, but you just made things worse, my mother-in-law continued. Sarah stammered, unable to respond. You always wear beautiful clothes and have so many purses, my mother-in-law noted. Yes, that's true. I always make sure to look presentable wherever I go, Sarah answered, trying to regain control. Where does the money for that come from? My mother-in-law asked, causing Sarah to freeze. Of course, from my work. We're paying you for helping with the tuition and accounting at the tutoring center, my mother-in-law said, adding, but even if my son said you could use that money freely, it doesn't seem like it would be enough. Your clothes and purses are all designer brands. Sarah, stunned, tried to respond. What do you mean? I mean, are you using your control over the household finances to satisfy your own desires? My mother-in-law asked. Sarah was taken aback, stammering, I don't understand. I had always wondered about the source of their money. I had assumed my brother-in-law was generous, maybe even trusting Sarah with all the finances, but now it seemed concerning. Perhaps he wasn't paying attention to how much she was spending. I almost felt sorry for him, realizing how much she controlled. My mother-in-law continued, so, you've been spending money freely, and now you want to send your child to a private school. You've been saving up for their education, haven't you? Well, you're not expecting us to pay, are you? Sarah stammered. No, not at all, Sarah quickly added, but he's your adorable grandchild after all. So, you've been planning to rely on my father-in-law and mother-in-law's money all along, my mother-in-law said. Sarah had been caught, and her true intentions were becoming clear. We love our grandchildren, my mother-in-law said, and we're thinking of supporting them financially if necessary. Really? Sarah asked, sounding surprised, but only after you leave our home. My mother-in-law added, What? No, there's no need for that, Sarah quickly protested. I'll apologize to Karen for telling her to leave. Karen, it's the first time she's referred to me by name, I said, not sure how to respond. You will forgive me, right? We're sisters after all, Sarah said, trying to smooth things over. Only while you're married to my brother-in-law, my mother-in-law said, signaling to me to continue. I took a deep breath and said, even if it's official, I don't want to become family. I don't think of you as a sister. Sarah seemed caught off guard and made an awkward noise, shocked by my response, but my mother-in-law wasn't done. You've also been using the money from the tutoring school, she said. Sarah went silent, her face turning pale. Is that true? She asked, looking at my mother-in-law in disbelief. I was surprised too. I knew Sarah liked to spend money freely, but I didn't expect her to touch the funds from the tutoring center my in-laws ran. You were careful not to get caught, so it took us a while to figure it out, my mother-in-law continued. Even Bob, who's been in charge of our accounts for years, didn't see it, but we eventually discovered it. Sarah looked stunned, not knowing what to say. You bought things like gift baskets for the suppliers of our teaching materials, my mother-in-law explained. You said it was for expressing gratitude to teachers or holding seminars, but the amounts kept growing. You made excuses, saying these were birthday presents, or that my son or I asked you to buy them, but it wasn't true. No, that's not what I meant, Sarah stammered, trying to deny it. You bought things other than gift baskets, and labeled them as presents, my mother-in-law said firmly. This has never happened before. You told Bob you were taking part-time lectures to lunch, but instead you were dining and drinking tea with your mom friends. Sarah looked cornered, stammering, but it was clear she couldn't deny it anymore. The receipts kept piling up, my mother-in-law said. Bob started to suspect something, and soon after, he began his own investigation. You betrayed the trust of everyone who believed in you, my mother-in-law said firmly, her eyes fixed on Sarah. It seems that dressing up is more important to you than anything else. Sarah, now nearly in tears, turned to my brother-in-law, her voice barely a whisper, hoping for help, but he just stared at her coldly, saying nothing. If all of this is true, my mother-in-law continued, I can't blame him. Karen is the opposite. She may not be into fashion, but she always puts her family and her job first. You, however, don't seem to care about either. Sarah was left speechless, her usual bravado gone. My mother-in-law turned to me and began speaking about my work with pride. I felt a warmth in my eyes as she spoke about how much she respected me. You've worked so hard to get where you are. You're a certified professional, and I know how much effort you put into your job. You never care if your clothes get dirty or if your hands are covered in soil, and yet Sarah mocks you for it. I remained quiet, feeling a wave of gratitude toward my mother-in-law, while Sarah hung her head low, unable to defend herself. Our tutoring school may not be as big as major corporations, but we value our teachers and students. We've earned their trust, and we've grown little by addressing individual issues. What's important is people and their hearts, not material things, my mother-in-law said. You're the one who doesn't belong here, she added. You're the one who should leave. Sarah, now defeated and silent, realized she could no longer pretend to be the perfect, elegant wife. The truth about her embezzling money from the tutoring school came to light, and she was forced to leave the family. My brother-in-law tried to discuss things with her, but Sarah refused to acknowledge her mistakes. Her anger led to divorce papers being served, and she lost everything. With the revelation of her embezzlement, she had no claim to compensation. She lost custody of their son, who would now stay with my brother-in-law and my in-laws. He had wanted to go to private school, but he disliked being forced to study. Instead, he was now happily playing with our daughter. My husband and I decided to support them in any way we could. A few days later, at a peaceful gathering at my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law quietly came to me and said, I'm really sorry for making you uncomfortable for so long. We should have noticed sooner. I smiled and reassured her, no, not at all. At first, I wasn't really bothered by the situation, but then my mother-in-law said, if you ever need anything in the future, don't hesitate to tell us. I smiled and thought about her earlier words, what's important is people and hearts. As I was lost in thought, my mother-in-law noticed and gave me a puzzled look. It's nothing, I said quickly, I was just thinking how cool you are. Well, thank you, but the cool one is you, she replied. You're able to create such beautiful gardens. Maybe I should ask you to help with ours next time. I want to replant the flower bed. Absolutely, I'd love to help, even if it's not for work, I said eagerly, just let me know. Make sure you charge her, my husband teased, adding a playful comment. We all laughed together. Value people, cherish hearts, I thought to myself, reflecting on how much I appreciated my family. In the future, I hope to spend more time laughing with my precious family.
Who is she, Kyle? I demanded, clutching my newborn son Jake tightly against my chest. My heart pounded as I looked at the young woman standing next to him. Her presence in our home felt like an intrusion, a cold slap in the face. Kyle's eyes were icy, devoid of any warmth. Meet Aaron, he said flatly. We're together now. The room spun. Just hours ago I'd been overwhelmed with joy at Jake's birth. Kyle hadn't been there, but I had thought he might have been caught up with work. Now I realized he had more sinister priorities. Together, I croaked, struggling to process his words. But we have a child, Kyle. Our child. Erin shifted uncomfortably, but didn't leave. Her presence alone shattered my world. There was no remorse in Kyle's eyes, no hesitation. I've moved on, Mia, he said, crossing his arms. His stance was defensive yet unyielding. I've been with Aaron for months now. I stood there, unable to react immediately. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and heartache. I looked at Jake's tiny face, peaceful and unaware of the chaos unfolding around him. Dots of tears burned at the corner of my eyes, but I refused to let them spill. Not in front of Kyle. Not in front of her. When I finally spoke, my voice trembled. You couldn't even wait until I got home? Until our son was here safely? You had to bring her here now? Kyle sighed as if he were the victim in all this. His indifference was a knife twisting deeper into my heart. This is my home too, Mia. Aaron has a right to be here. I took a deep breath, determined to keep my composure. You couldn't tell me this before you broke your vows? You just let me carry your child while you threw us away for her? Erin finally spoke, her voice soft, almost apologetic. Mia, I truly didn't mean for this to happen this way. Didn't mean for this to happen? I echoed, venom lacing my words. You knew he's married. You knew we have a baby. How could you stand by him, knowing he was abandoning his family? She flinched, but didn't reply. I turned my attention back to Kyle. All those years together, from high school sweethearts to hopeful newlyweds, now felt like lies. Every struggle we overcame, every memory we created, was it all for nothing? I don't even recognize you, I said, my voice choked with emotion. How could you become so heartless? Kyle shrugged, his expression weary. People change, Mia. You need to let it go. I stared at him, searching for any glimmer of the man I once loved. There was nothing but a stranger. I looked back down at Jake, my heart breaking anew for his innocent face. I need you to leave, I said finally, stepping back towards the nursery door. Both of you. Just go. Kyle opened his mouth to argue, but for once, Aaron took a step forward and placed a hand on his arm. Maybe it's better if we leave, she said quietly. He hesitated, then nodded. Without another word, they left, their footsteps echoing through the deserted hallway. I held Jake closer, feeling the weight of our shattered life pressed down on my shoulders. As the door closed behind them, I sunk onto the bed, tears streaming down my face. This was not the life I envisioned for my son, not the family I dreamt of. But one thing was clear. I would pick up the pieces for Jake. I would fight for a better future, for both of us. I sat in my parents' living room, cradling Jake, who was now peacefully asleep. The memories of Kyle's betrayal were fresh, but under the layer of pain, memories of our past together started resurfacing. It all began in high school. Kyle was the charming, confident senior everyone admired. I was a sophomore, shy and unassuming. One day after classes, he approached me with an easy grin. Hey, Mia, he said casually, leaning against my locker. Want to grab a soda with me? I remember the flutter in my chest, the excitement of being noticed by someone like him. We talked for hours that day, laughing and sharing stories. It was the beginning of what felt like an epic love story. Over the years, we became inseparable. We went to prom together, graduated together, and dreamed of a future where nothing could pull us apart. The bond we shared seemed unbreakable, built on trust and unwavering affection. After high school, I went to college a few states away. Kyle stayed behind to work at his family's business. The distance was hard, but we made it work. Every holiday, every chance we got, we spent it together. It was during one of these visits, when we drove up to the mountains for a weekend getaway, that Kyle proposed. We stood on a cliff overlooking a beautiful valley, the sun setting behind us. Kyle got down on one knee, holding a small velvet box. Mia, will you marry me? He asked, his eyes bright with hope. My heart soared. Yes, Kyle. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Our wedding was like something out of a fairy tale. Surrounded by family and friends, we exchanged vows in a quaint little church. Kyle looked at me with such love and promise in his eyes as we said our I do's. The future seemed limitless. In the early days of our marriage, we were blissfully happy. We moved into a cozy apartment, decorated it together, and started dreaming of building a family. We would take long walks, cook together, and talk late into the night about our plans and dreams. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. Kyle became busier at work. His nights grew later, his excuses flimsier. I began noticing his absence more, feeling the growing distance between us. Then came the day I found out I was pregnant. I was overjoyed, thinking it would bring us closer. Kyle's initial reaction seemed positive. That's great news, Mia, he said, hugging me with what felt like genuine warmth. but it wasn't long before his late nights became more frequent. I convinced myself he was just stressed about becoming a parent. I tried to be understanding, supportive. I wanted to believe that our love was still strong, that we could overcome anything. Now, holding Jake and thinking about the past, I wondered how I could have been so blind. The signs were there, the subtle shifts in Kyle's behavior, his growing secrecy. I tried bringing us back to the simple, happy couple we once were, but I was fighting a losing battle. My parents' house, with its familiar smells and warmth, felt like a sanctuary. My mom, Linda, walked in, her face filled with concern. "How are you holding up, honey?" she asked gently. I looked at her, the tears threatening to spill. "I'm trying, Mom. For Jake." She wrapped an arm around me, her presence soothing. "We're here for you, Mia. Whatever you need, we're here." As I sat there, I understood that I couldn't dwell in the past. I needed to gather my strength for Jake and for myself. Because the happy memories were overshadowed by the reality of who Kyle had become. And now it was time to move forward and build a future where we could thrive without him. The weeks after Jake's birth blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and heartache. Kyle's betrayal was still fresh, but there were days I forced myself to believe he might come around, for Jake's sake. One evening, I sat on the living room floor with a stack of baby clothes, folding them one by one. Jake was in his bassinet nearby, his soft coos filling the room. Hearing a car pull up, my heart skipped a beat. Maybe Kyle realized his mistake. Kyle walked in with a stack of papers and a distracted look. He glanced at Jake but barely acknowledged me. "Can you sign these?" he asked, thrusting the papers toward me. I took them, confusion clouding my mind. "What are these?" "Separation papers," he said bluntly, avoiding eye contact. Anger welled up inside me. "Separation papers? You can't be serious." Kyle sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's the same thing, Mia. We're done." I stood up, locking eyes with him. "We have a child, Kyle. Don't you care about him at all?" "Of course I care," he snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. I didn't back down. "Then why are you doing this? Why throw everything away?" He avoided my gaze. "Erin and I, it's serious, Mia." I moved in with her. The weight of his words crushed me, but I held my ground. Jake deserves better than this, and so did I. Kyle finally met my eyes, but there was no softness, no regret. "It's over, Mia. Sign the papers." I clenched my fists, resisting the urge to scream. "Get out, Kyle. Just get out." He looked at Jake for a brief moment, then turned and left without another word. I let out a shaky breath, feeling both relief and despair. Days turned into weeks, and Kyle's visits became rare and colder. One afternoon, sitting on the porch with Jake, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned to see Kyle, his expression distant. "You're late again," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Kyle just shrugged. "Work's been busy." "Work?" I scoffed. "We both know it's not work keeping you." He looked annoyed, shifting his weight. "What do you want from me, Mia?" "To be a father to Jake, to show up when you say you will," I said, the frustration bubbling up. "Look, I'm trying, okay?" Kyle snapped. "Things are complicated." "And whose fault is that?" I shot back. "You made your choices. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities." He rubbed his face, looking exhausted. "I know, Mia. But Erin? She's pregnant." The world tilted. My breath caught in my throat. "Excuse me?" Kyle's face twisted with an unspoken plea. "She's pregnant, Mia. I need to be there for her." The shock turned to rage. "So you're just going to abandon Jake for her and another child? How can you be so heartless?" Kyle looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm doing what I think is right." I took a deep breath, realizing he was beyond reasoning. "Get out, Kyle, and don't come back until you figure out what it means to be a decent human being." He left without another word. As he walked away, I felt a grim determination rise within me. Jake and I would be fine. We didn't need him. We deserved better. And if Kyle wanted to become a ghost in our lives, then he'd face the consequences of his choices. Every action has a reaction, and Kyle would soon learn that actions have consequences, even if he was too blind to see them now. And I would make sure of it. Settling back at my parents' home was both a comfort and a reminder of how everything had unraveled. Their house was warm and full of love, a stark contrast to the cold indifference Kyle showed us. Mom and Dad were fantastic with Jake, and it was their support that kept me going each day. "Mom, do you think I did something wrong?" I asked one evening while she was helping me with dinner. It was a question that had nagged me for weeks. Mom turned, her eyes soft and concerned. No, honey, this isn't your fault. Kyle made his choices. People change, but that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. I just don't understand how he could turn his back on us so easily, I said, stirring the pot absent-mindedly. Some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone, she replied, placing her hand on my shoulder. You're stronger than you think, Mia. You have a beautiful son and a family that loves you. A few days later, I decided to take Jake for a walk in the park. It was a way to clear my mind, to focus on the simple joy in his innocent giggles and wide-eyed curiosity. As I navigated the stroller along the path, a familiar voice called out to me, "Mia, is that you?" I turned to see an old friend from high school, Laura, approaching with her own toddler in tow. We hadn't spoken in years. Her presence was a pleasant surprise. "Laura, it's been ages," I said, smiling. "I heard what happened," she said, her face sympathetic. "I'm so sorry, Mia." "Thanks," I replied. "Coming back here has been hard, but I need to focus on what's best for Jake." Laura nodded. "You're doing the right thing, Mia. It's just awful what Kyle did. I can't even fathom it." The sincerity in her voice was comforting. We talked for a while, reminiscing about old times and catching up on our lives. As we chatted, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was good to be reminded that I had people who cared. When the conversation turned to our futures, I felt a spark of determination. "I have to move forward, for Jake and for me," I said, the resolve clear in my voice. Laura smiled encouragingly. "You will, Mia, and you'll come out stronger on the other side." Returning home later that afternoon, I found solace in daily routine and the support system around me. But in quiet moments, the hurt would resurface, reminding me of the harsh reality of my situation. My parents, seeing my struggle, tried to comfort me as much as they could. "Mia, why don't you take some time for yourself tonight? We'll look after Jake," Dad suggested one evening. I hesitated, but then nodded. "Thanks, Dad. I think I need it." I stepped out for a walk alone. The night air was cool and refreshing. I needed this time to clear my head, to think about the future. If Kyle thought he could just move on without repercussions, he was wrong. His cruelty had consequences. I would fight for Jake, and I would make sure Kyle understood what he had lost. Not out of spite, but because we deserved better. Returning home, I felt a newfound strength. Kyle's abandonment didn't define us. His actions wouldn't break us. We would find happiness again, and I was ready to face whatever came next. My determination solidified into a quiet, unwavering resolve. For Jake and for myself, we would rise above this, stronger than ever. The day of Jake's birth was supposed to be a joyous occasion. Instead, it turned into a day of reckoning. I was in labor, and Kyle was nowhere to be found. My mom held my hand, her calm eyes giving me strength. "He's going to regret this, Mia. You just focus on bringing Jake into this world," she whispered. Hours passed, and Kyle still hadn't shown up. Exhausted but determined, I pushed through the pain. Surrounded by the warmth of my hands, I finally heard Jake's first cries. He was perfect. As I held him, a door creaked open. I looked up to see Kyle, and to my horror, Aaron was with him. They stood in the doorway, looking awkward and out of place. "You're too late, Kyle," I said coldly, clutching Jake protectively. Kyle stepped forward, his expression flat. I came as soon as I could." Aaron shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak. My mom stood up, her anger barely contained. "How dare you bring her here?" she demanded, her voice shaking with fury. "You missed your son's birth, Kyle." Kyle glanced at Aaron, then back at us. "I didn't know the labor would be so quick," he said, his excuse falling flat. "That's your excuse?" I said, my voice rising. "You abandoned us, Kyle. This isn't something you can just walk away from." He frowned, looking at Jake. "I didn't abandon you. Things are complicated." "Complicated?" I couldn't hold back anymore. "You chose her over your family. That's not complicated. That's betrayal." Aaron looked like she wanted to disappear. "Mia, we didn't mean for it to happen like this." I laughed bitterly. "Really? You didn't think about how it would affect Jake and me? What did you think would happen?" Kyle took a step closer, but Mom moved between us. "You need to leave, Kyle. Right now." Kyle looked like he wanted to argue, but then his shoulders slumped. He turned and walked out, Aaron following closely behind. The door closed with a finality that echoed in the room. Returning my attention to Jake, I felt my resolve harden. I wasn't going to let Kyle's betrayal defeat us. My parents' support bolstered my strength. I knew that we could build a new life, one filled with love and support, even without Kyle. Over the next few weeks, I focused on Jake and tried to find some normalcy. But every time Kyle came by, rarely and always with flimsy excuses, the wound reopened. One evening, after another missed visit, I decided enough was enough. Dialing Kyle's number, I waited as it rang. When he picked up, I didn't give him a chance to speak. "Kyle, this isn't working. You're barely here, and when you are, you aren't present." He sighed on the other end. "Mia, what do you want from me?" "I want you to either step up or stay away," I said firmly. "Jake deserves better. I deserve better." There was a long pause. "Fine, I'll stay away. I think it's better for everyone." I hung up, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. But mostly, I felt a newfound strength. Jake and I would be okay. We didn't need Kyle to define our happiness. As I rocked Jake to sleep that night, I whispered, "We're going to be all right, little one. We're going to build a beautiful life, just you and me." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We had a long journey ahead, but I was ready for it. For Jake, I would face every challenge head-on, and with my family's support, there was nothing we couldn't overcome. Jake was napping in his crib when I heard a knock on the door. Surprised, I wiped my hands and headed to answer it. Standing on the porch was Susan, Kyle's mother, looking more tired and worn than I'd ever seen her. "Mia, can I come in?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, stepping back to let her in. She glanced around the house, her eyes lingering on photos of Jake and me. We settled into the living room, and I prepared for whatever was coming next. "I'm sorry for showing up unannounced," Susan started, her eyes welling up. "I just found out about Aaron and everything." I took a deep breath. "Susan, I don't know what to say. Your son, She reached over, grasping my hands. "I know, Mia. I know what Kyle's done, and I'm so ashamed. He's broken my heart, too." The raw pain in her voice mirrored my own. "He missed Jake's birth, Susan. He brought her to the hospital. He's been completely absent." My voice cracked, but I willed myself not to cry. Susan nodded, her face hardening. "I'm not here to make excuses for him. I've seen his behavior for years, the irresponsibility, the selfishness. I always hoped he'd grow out of it." Her hand tightened around mine. "But this is unforgivable." She let go of my hands and leaned back, her composure barely holding. "I came because I don't want you to think we're all like him. Jake is still my grandson, and you are still family to me." I nodded, feeling my own tears threaten to spill. "Thank you, Susan. It means more than you know." Susan looked determined. "Kyle will have to face the consequences of his actions. I won't support him in this. I'll make sure he knows what he's thrown away, and he'll feel every moment of regret." Just then, another knock interrupted us. Erin stood at the door, looking hesitant and remorseful. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Susan's eyes flashed with anger, but I nodded, allowing Erin inside. She stood awkwardly by the doorway, clearly aware of the tension in the room. "I didn't know you were here, Mrs. Harrison," Erin said, her voice meek. Susan didn't waste a second. "What do you want, Erin? Haven't you caused enough damage?" Tears welled up in Erin's eyes. "I didn't come to cause more pain. I came to apologize." "You think an apology fixes this?" Susan snapped, her voice filled with contempt. "You destroyed my family." Erin looked at me, desperation in her eyes. "Mia, I know I've done horrible things. I know Kyle's not who I thought he was. I just found out he's been lying to me, too." I raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "A lot of things," Erin replied, wiping her tears. "He told me he would leave you months ago, that you two were practically over. I believed him. And now—" Her voice broke. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. "And now?" I prompted, though my voice was still cold. Erin looked down. "He's still seeing someone else. I found out yesterday. I can't believe I ever trusted him." Susan shook her head, exasperated. "My son has always been selfish. This just proves it." Erin took a deep breath, gathering her resolve. "I'm willing to help you, Mia. Kyle needs to face what he's done, and I'll stand by you if you want to take this further. Legally, emotionally, whatever you need." I looked at Erin, seeing for the first time a woman who had been lied to, manipulated, much like me. I nodded slowly. "All right, Erin, let's hold him accountable together." Susan's eyes softened as she looked between us. "Good. He needs to learn, and he will." In that moment, I realized our strength lay in unity. We would confront Kyle together, and he would regret every choice he made. For Jake, and for all of us, revenge would be our quietly spoken promise. Moving back into my parents' home felt like a fresh chapter. Linda and George welcomed me with open arms, and Susan remained a constant support. Each day I felt stronger, more determined to carve out a new life for Jake and me. One afternoon, while Jake was napping, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Erin standing there, looking more resolved than I'd ever seen her. "I found something you need to see," she said, holding up a stack of papers. I let her in, and we sat at the kitchen table. "What is it?" I asked, intrigued. "Proof," Erin said simply. "Proof of Kyle's deceit. Finances, text messages, emails. He's been siphoning money, lying to everyone, and cheating on me too." Her voice trembled, but anger and resolve shone through. I took a minute to go through the documents she presented, feeling a mix of vindication and anger. "This is unbelievable. I knew he wasn't honest, but I didn't know it was this bad." Erin nodded. "I thought I could trust him. I was wrong. And now, I want to help you get what you deserve." Susan walked in just then, and seeing the papers on the table, asked, "What's all this?" Erin explained as succinctly as she could. Susan's eyes widened with each revelation. "He's more despicable than I thought," she muttered. I looked up at Erin. "Thank you for this. It's more than I could have hoped for. Now we can hold him accountable." Erin let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I want to set things right." It wasn't long before we set up a meeting with a lawyer. With Susan's encouragement and Erin's support, I felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. George drove us to the lawyer's office, his reassuring presence calming my nerves. Attorney Parker greeted us warmly. "Let's get started," he said as we took our seats. "These documents could be pivotal. We need to compile a strong case for custody and support." We spent hours cataloging the evidence and formulating a strategy. Parker assured us, "Kyle's actions are reprehensible. The court will see that." Weeks passed as our case took shape. Kyle remained oblivious, continuing his life as though nothing had changed. But our silence would not last long. With each passing day, our resolve grew stronger. One evening, Susan, Erin, and I sat in my living room discussing the latest updates. "The court date is set for next month," I said. "I'm ready." Susan nodded. "You're doing the right thing, Mia, for Jake and for yourself." Erin chimed in, her voice steady. "I'll testify to everything, Mia. He can't escape the truth." The day of the hearing arrived. Erin and I entered the courtroom with a mix of trepidation and determination. Parker greeted us, his encouraging smile a boost to our confidence. Kyle walked in, looking clueless. When he saw us united, his expression darkened. He tried to approach, but Parker intercepted him. "Mr. Harrison, please take your seat." The hearings were intense, filled with revelations that painted Kyle in his true colors. Texts and emails exposed his infidelities and financial deceit. Erin's testimony was damning, her voice unwavering as she recounted the lies and manipulation. When it was my turn to speak, I felt all eyes on me. "Kyle abandoned our family when we needed him most," I said, my voice steady. "He missed the birth of our son, brought his mistress to the hospital, and continued to lie and deceive us. Jake deserves better. We deserve better." The judge took it all in, her expression stern. "Mr. Harrison, your actions have been reprehensible. Given the evidence, I grant full custody to Mrs. Harrison, along with the necessary support and protection measures." Kyle looked defeated, his arrogance shattered. As we walked out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Erin and Susan flanked me, their presence a testament to the strength and unity. Outside, I hugged Erin. "Thank you," I said, my eyes meeting hers. She smiled, tears in her own eyes. "We did it, Mia." Susan placed a hand on my shoulder. "Now you can move forward, Mia. Build a life where you and Jake can thrive." As we drove home, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The fight was hard, but it was worth it. We had faced Kyle's vile nature head-on, and we had won. Now it was time to focus on the future, stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The weeks following the court ruling were transformative. Life slowly began to fall into a new rhythm. Jake's laughter filled the house, and with every milestone he achieved, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. One sunny afternoon, I was in the yard, watching Jake attempt his first wobbly steps on the grass. Susan arrived, her face lit with joy as she watched her grandson. "Look at him go!" she exclaimed, clapping her hands. I turned to see a shadow approach from the driveway. Erin stepped out of her car, a tentative smile on her face. "Can I join you guys?" she asked softly. "Of course," I replied, waving her over. Erin sat next to me on the porch steps, her eyes fixed on Jake. "He's growing so fast," she murmured. "Time moves quickly," Susan noted, her gaze soft. We watched Jake for a while, his giggles blending with the sound of rustling leaves. There was a peace in the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had once dominated our lives. Erin broke the silence, her voice somber. "I saw Kyle yesterday. He's not doing well." Susan stiffened but remained silent. I looked at Erin, curiosity piqued. "What happened?" "He's living alone, lost his job, and looks like he's given up on everything. It's sad in a way," Erin explained, shaking her head. I felt a flicker of pity but quickly pushed it away. "He made his choices," I said firmly. "Now he's facing the consequences." Erin nodded, her eyes filled with regret. "Still, it's hard to see someone fall so far." Susan finally spoke, her voice steady. "Kyle had every opportunity to turn his life around, to make things right. Instead, he chose a path of deceit and self-destruction. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom to understand the gravity of their actions." Jake stumbled and fell, but quickly picked himself up, his resilient spirit shining through. I smiled, feeling a sense of pride and hope. Erin watched him, a newfound respect in her eyes. "You're doing an amazing job with him, Mia. He's lucky to have you," Erin said, her voice sincere. "Thank you," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm determined to give him the best life possible." As the days turned into weeks, I noticed a change in myself. The anger and hurt began to fade, replaced by a sense of resolution and peace. Jake thrived under the love and stability provided by my parents, Susan, and even Erin, who had become a more frequent presence. One evening after Jake had been put to bed, Susan stayed behind, her eyes shining with a new light. "Mia, I've been thinking," she began. "You have such a gift for nurturing and creating a loving environment. Have you ever considered starting a parenting support group?" The idea took me by surprise, but it resonated deeply. "I haven't, but it sounds like something that could help others, and help me too." Susan smiled broadly. "I'd be happy to support you in any way. You have a story that can inspire and empower many." With Susan's encouragement and Erin's backing, I began planning the support group. It wasn't just about sharing my journey, but about building a community where parents could find strength and solidarity in one another. Months later, our first meeting was a success. As I looked around the room, filled with parents sharing their stories, offering support to one another, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. We were all stronger together, united by our shared experiences and determination to build better futures for our children. Kyle's absence was a reminder of the past, but it no longer defined our present. My focus was on Jake, on the people who stood by us, and on the future we were building, one filled with love, support, and unbreakable bonds. And in that, we found our retribution, our poetic justice, and our peace. The ringing of my phone jolted me from a much-needed nap. "Ben, it's your day off, right?" Levi's voice boomed through the speaker. "Yeah, finally getting some rest. What's up?" I rubbed my eyes, sitting upright on the worn couch that doubled as my bed. "I've met someone, and I'm going to marry her. You need to meet her." The excitement in my younger brother's tone was palpable, and I couldn't help but smile. Levi's successes in life were a stark contrast to my own struggles. While he thrived in the corporate world, I barely scraped by as a construction worker, having dropped out of high school years ago to support us both. Our mother had abandoned us when Levi was just a toddler, leaving me to be the caretaker. Dad was around, but his presence was fleeting at best. I still remembered the countless nights I'd gone hungry just to ensure Levi had something to eat. Despite the hardships, we remained close, and Levi's achievements filled me with pride. If anyone deserved happiness, it was him. "That's great news, bro," I replied, trying to match his enthusiasm. "When can I meet her?" The rest of the week flew by, and before I knew it, Levi was knocking on my apartment door, his fiancée in tow. Amanda Bridges was a striking woman, her designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair a stark contrast to my modest surroundings. "Ben, this is Amanda," Levi beamed, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Amanda, meet my big brother." Her gaze swept over me, a slight crinkle forming between her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. I didn't realize Levi had a brother who didn't finish high school. The words stung, but I forced a smile. Yeah, I had to start working early to take care of Levi. Levi shot her a look, but Amanda remained unfazed. As the evening progressed, her subtle jabs continued, each one chipping away at my confidence. This apartment could use a woman's touch, she remarked, eyeing the cluttered living space with disdain. Ben's been too busy working to worry about decor, Levi replied, his tone edged with a warning. But Amanda pressed on, her comments growing bolder with each passing minute. By the time they left, I felt like a failure, unworthy of my own brother's company. The following week, Amanda cornered me outside my apartment. Ben, I can't have you attend the wedding, she stated bluntly. Your presence would undermine our image. I stared at her, dumbfounded. I'm Levy's only family. How can you ask me to do that? Her perfectly glossed lips curved into a condescending smile. Levi deserves better than a high school dropout for a brother. Do the right thing and stay away. Shame washed over me as her words hit their mark. Levi had worked so hard to achieve success, and I was holding him back. With a heavy heart, I agreed to her demands, convincing myself it was for the best. A few weeks later, Levi showed up at my door again, this time with Amanda in tow. Her nose crinkled as she stepped inside, her eyes sweeping over the modest living space with disdain. This is where you live? She asked, her voice dripping with judgment. Before I could respond, Levi shot me an apologetic look. Amanda wanted to see your place. I forced a smile, determined not to let her get under my skin. Make yourselves at home. Amanda perched on the edge of the couch, her posture stiff and uncomfortable. I must say, Ben, I'm surprised Levi didn't mention your living situation. What's wrong with it? I challenged, unable to bite my tongue any longer. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched in mock surprise. Well, it's just rather modest, don't you think? Especially for someone who works in construction. Levi shifted uncomfortably beside her. Amanda, that's enough. But she ignored him, her gaze boring into me with thinly veiled disdain. I simply expected more from Levi's family. After all, he's worked so hard to better himself. The implication was clear. I was a disappointment, a stain on Levi's success. My jaw clenched as anger bubbled within me, but I swallowed it down, refusing to give her the satisfaction. I may not have much, but I've always done my best for Levi, I said, my voice tight with restrained emotion. Amanda's lips curved into a condescending smile. Of course, dear. I'm sure you meant well. The rest of the evening was a blur of thinly veiled insults and snide remarks, each one chipping away at my already fragile self-esteem. By the time they left, I felt like a failure, unworthy of my own brother's company. In the days that followed, Amanda's words haunted me, echoing in my mind like a relentless mantra. I was a disappointment, a burden on Levi's success. The thought consumed me, fueling a growing sense of resentment towards the woman who had so effortlessly torn me down. But I couldn't bring myself to confront Levi about it. He seemed so happy, so utterly smitten with Amanda. Who was I to stand in the way of his happiness, even if it came at the cost of my own self-worth? So I kept my mouth shut, burying my feelings deep inside and forcing a smile whenever Levi brought up the wedding plans. It was a small price to pay, I told myself, for the sake of my brother's happiness. But as the weeks ticked by, Amanda's cruelty only intensified, her barbs growing sharper and more pointed with each encounter. It was as if she took perverse pleasure in tormenting me, reveling in the power she held over my fragile sense of self. And through it all, Levi remained oblivious, too blinded by love to see the truth behind Amanda's carefully crafted facade. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity, and I found myself caught in the eye of the storm. Levi was constantly busy with preparations, leaving me to fend off Amanda's relentless attacks alone. It was during one of these encounters that she finally dropped the bombshell. Ben, I can't have you attend the wedding, she stated bluntly, cornering me outside my apartment one evening. I stared at her, dumbfounded. What? Why not? Her perfectly glossed lips curved into a condescending smile. Your presence would undermine our image. Levi deserves better than a high school dropout for a brother. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I opened my mouth to protest, but Amanda held up a perfectly manicured hand, effectively silencing me. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Ben. Do the right thing and stay away. Shame washed over me as her words hit their mark. She was right. Levi had worked so hard to achieve success, and I was holding him back. With a heavy heart, I nodded, too stunned to formulate a response. Amanda's smile widened, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. I knew you'd see reason. This is for the best, believe me. As she turned and walked away, I felt something inside me shatter. All the sacrifices I'd made for Levi, all the nights I'd gone hungry to ensure he had a roof over his head, it all meant nothing in the face of Amanda's cruel judgment. In the days that followed, I wrestled with the decision. Torn between my love for Levi and the gnawing sense of inadequacy that Amanda had so expertly cultivated. I wanted nothing more than to be there for my brother on his special day, but the fear of embarrassing him or ruining his happiness was too great a risk. So I stayed silent, burying my pain and resentment deep inside, forcing a smile whenever Levi brought up the wedding plans. It was a small price to pay, I told myself, for the sake of his happiness. But as the big day drew nearer, my resolve began to waver. Memories of our childhood flickered through my mind, reminding me of all the times I'd been there for Levi when no one else was. How could I abandon him now, when he needed me most? The night before the wedding, I found myself pacing the floor of my tiny apartment, consumed by indecision. Part of me longed to defy Amanda's cruel demands, to show up and support my brother no matter the cost. But the other part, the part that had been beaten down and demoralized by her relentless attacks, whispered that I didn't belong. As the hours ticked by, I wrestled with the decision, torn between my love for Levi and the fear of bringing him shame. It was a battle I knew I couldn't win alone. A few days before the wedding, I found myself at my grandfather's funeral, surrounded by the few remaining members of our fractured family. As I stood beside the open casket, staring at the weathered face of the man who had been more of a father to me than my own, a familiar voice called out from behind. "Ben Harper, is that you?" I turned to see Ray Morgan, my grandfather's oldest friend, approaching with a warm smile. "It's been too long, son." I embraced the old man, grateful for his comforting presence. "Thanks for coming, Ray. Gramps would have been happy to see you." Ray's eyes crinkled at the corners as he studied my face. "You've been through a lot, haven't you, boy? Life hasn't been easy on you." I shrugged, trying to brush off his concern. "It is what it is. I've had to make sacrifices, but it was worth it for Levi." Ray's expression softened, and he placed a weathered hand on my shoulder. "Your sacrifices haven't gone unnoticed, Ben. Your brother owes you more than he knows." Tears stung my eyes as the weight of his words hit me. All these years I'd been silently carrying the burden, never once expecting recognition or gratitude. But hearing Ray acknowledge my struggles, it was like a dam breaking within me. Before I knew it, the words were tumbling out, unbidden. I told him everything, about Amanda's cruel demands, her relentless attacks on my self-worth, and my fear of ruining Levi's special day. Ray listened patiently, his brow furrowed in concern. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. "That woman doesn't deserve your brother, Ben. And you sure as hell don't deserve to be treated like that." His words struck a chord, resonating deep within me. For the first time, I felt a flicker of defiance, a spark of resistance against Amanda's cruelty. "What should I do, Ray?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. The old man's eyes hardened, a steely determination settling over his features. "You show up at that wedding, son. You show up and you remind your brother who's been there for him all these years. Blood is thicker than water, and no amount of money or status can change that." As I left the funeral, Ray's words echoed in my mind, igniting a fire within me that I thought had long since been extinguished. I was done being a doormat, done letting Amanda walk all over me and my family. This was my brother's wedding, and I'd be damned if I let her keep me away. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, but the turmoil within me was far from settled. Ray's words had reignited a fire in my soul, but the fear of disappointing Levi still gnawed at the back of my mind. As I paced the floor of my apartment, my gaze kept drifting to the neatly pressed suit hanging in the corner, a silent reminder of the decision I had yet to make. Part of me longed to put it on, to show up and support my brother no matter the cost. But the other part, the part that had been beaten down and demoralized by Amanda's relentless attacks, whispered that I didn't belong. In the end, it was the thought of my grandfather that tipped the scales. He had always been my rock, my guiding light in the darkest of times. And I knew, deep down, that he would want me to be there for Levi, no matter what. With a newfound resolve, I donned the suit and headed out the door, my heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and determination. As I approached the church, the sound of laughter and music drifted through the open doors, mingling with the excited chatter of guests. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside, my eyes immediately drawn to the lavish decorations and the throngs of well-dressed strangers milling about. It was then that I noticed the odd looks being exchanged, the hushed whispers and sidelong glances in my direction. Something wasn't right. Before I could ponder it further, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd, her eyes widening in shock and fury. "Ben," Amanda hissed, her perfectly painted lips curling into a sneer. "What are you doing here?" I straightened my spine, summoning every ounce of courage I possessed. "This is my brother's wedding. I have every right to be here." Her eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're ruining everything, Ben. Why couldn't you just stay away?" But before I could respond, a commotion erupted from the other side of the room, drawing everyone's attention. A young woman I didn't recognize was shouting, her face flushed with anger. "You lied to me, Amanda. You said this was a family event." Amanda's mask of composure slipped, and she whirled around, her perfectly coiffed hair swinging wildly. "What are you talking about?" The woman gestured to the crowd, her eyes flashing with fury. "These people aren't your family. They're all hired actors, just like me." A hush fell over the room as the guests absorbed her words, their expressions ranging from shock to outrage. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my ears as the truth sank in. Amanda had hired fake relatives to attend the wedding, all in a desperate bid to maintain her perfect facade. As the murmurs grew louder, Levi emerged from a side room, his face etched with confusion. "What's going on here?" Our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw a glimmer of understanding dawn in his expression. He knew, just as I did, that Amanda's carefully constructed world was crumbling around us. With a resolve I didn't know I possessed, I stepped forward, my gaze never wavering from my brother's. "Levi, there's something you need to know." The air was thick with tension as Levi's gaze shifted between me and the furious woman who had exposed Amanda's lies. Confusion and betrayal flickered across his face, and for a moment I feared he wouldn't believe me. But then, another voice rang out from the crowd, one that sent a chill down my spine. "Ben, is that really you?" My head whipped around, and there, standing among the sea of hired actors, was a familiar face, Sarah Reed, my old friend from high school. "Sarah?" I breathed, hardly daring to believe my eyes. "What are you doing here?" She stepped forward, her expression a mixture of disbelief and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "Amanda hired me, too. She said it was a family event, but then I realized none of these people were actually related to her." A hush fell over the room as Sarah's words sank in, and all eyes turned to Amanda, who stood frozen, her perfectly composed mask cracking under the weight of scrutiny. Levi was the first to break the silence, his voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "Amanda, what is going on here? Who are all these people?" For a moment, Amanda said nothing, her eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. Then her shoulders slumped, and she let out a bitter laugh. "Fine, you want the truth? These people are actors, hired to play the part of my loving family. Happy now?" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, and I saw Levi recoil as if he'd been struck. "But why?" he whispered, his voice laced with hurt. Amanda's eyes narrowed, and she turned her gaze on me, her lips curling into a sneer. "Because of him. Your pathetic excuse for a brother." I tensed, bracing myself for the onslaught of insults I knew was coming. From the moment I met Ben, I knew he was a liability. A high school dropout with no ambition, no drive. He was a stain on our perfect future. So I did what I had to do to protect us. Levi's eyes widened, and he shook his head slowly as if trying to dispel a bad dream. "You mean you did all this because of Ben?" Amanda scoffed, her disdain palpable. "Of course I did. I couldn't have my future husband's family embarrassing us in front of everyone. It would have ruined everything." Silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the occasional murmur of disbelief. I watched as Levi's expression hardened, the hurt and betrayal giving way to something darker, something I'd never seen in him before. "You lied to me. he said, his voice low and dangerous. You manipulated me, made me turn my back on my own brother. How could you do that, Amanda? For once, Amanda seemed at a loss for words, her carefully crafted facade crumbling before our eyes. Levi shook his head, his jaw clenched with barely contained rage. This wedding is off. I can't marry someone who would stoop so low, who would treat my family like that. A chorus of gasps and murmurs erupted from the crowd, but I barely heard them. All I could focus on was the look of vindication on Sarah's face as she stepped forward, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. That's not all, Levi, she said, her voice ringing out loud and clear. Amanda was planning to move far away after the wedding, leaving you behind without a second thought. The words hung in the air like a physical blow, and I watched as the color drained from Amanda's face. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. That's not true, she sputtered, her composure finally shattering. I would never. But Levi held up a hand, effectively silencing her. Save it, Amanda. I've heard enough. With that, he turned and stormed out of the church, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Amanda stood frozen, her perfect facade in tatters, as the guests erupted into a flurry of whispers and accusations. And in that moment, as I watched her world crumble around her, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. The woman who had tormented me, who had tried to tear my family apart, was finally getting her comeuppance. It was a small victory, but one that tasted oh so sweet. The aftermath of Amanda's exposure was like a whirlwind, sweeping through the church and leaving chaos in its wake. Guests scrambled to their feet, some rushing to comfort Levi, others hurling accusations at the shell-shocked Amanda. In the midst of the pandemonium, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd, his face etched with a mixture of fury and disbelief. Amanda, what have you done? Mr. Bridges, her father and a prominent bank executive, hissed, his eyes blazing with barely contained rage. Amanda opened her mouth, but no words came out. For once, the woman who had so effortlessly shredded my self-worth was rendered speechless. Mr. Bridges turned to me, his gaze softening ever so slightly. Ben, I had no idea she was capable of such deceit. I met his stare, feeling a strange sense of pity for the man whose daughter had so thoroughly disgraced him. I tried to warn Levi, but she wouldn't listen. He nodded, his jaw clenched tight. I'll deal with her later. Right now, your brother needs you. With those words, he pivoted on his heel and stormed off, leaving Amanda to face the wrath of the scorned guests alone. I didn't spare her a second glance. My focus was solely on Levi, who had retreated to a quiet corner of the church, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Levi? I approached cautiously, unsure of what to say. He looked up, his eyes haunted by a pain I couldn't begin to fathom. How could I have been so blind, Ben? How did I not see what she was really like? I sank onto the pew beside him, struggling to find the right words. She fooled us all, bro, but that's not on you. Levi shook his head, his gaze dropping to the floor. I trusted her, Ben. I was ready to spend the rest of my life with her. How could she do this, and to my own brother? The anguish in his voice was like a physical blow, and I found myself fighting back tears. All those years of sacrifice, of putting his needs before my own, and in the end, it had nearly cost him everything. I'm so sorry, Levi, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. If I had said something sooner, maybe. But he cut me off, his head snapping up with a fierceness I'd never seen before. No, Ben, don't you dare apologize for her actions. This is on her, not you. He reached out and grasped my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. You're my brother, Ben, my family, and I let some manipulative woman come between us. That's on me. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my lips as Levi pulled me into a fierce embrace, his body trembling with barely contained emotion. Thank you, he murmured, his voice muffled against my shoulder. Thank you for being there, even when I didn't deserve it. In that moment, all the pain and resentment I'd harbored towards Amanda melted away, replaced by a profound sense of relief and gratitude. My brother was back, and our bond was stronger than ever. As we pulled apart, I caught sight of Sarah lingering nearby, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Sarah, I called out, beckoning her over. Thank you for telling the truth. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. She shook her head, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. I couldn't let her get away with it, Ben. Not after everything she put you through. Levi's brow furrowed as he looked between us, realization dawning on his face. "You two know each other?" I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "Sarah and I go way back. We were friends in high school before life had pulled us in different directions, before the weight of responsibility had forced me to abandon my dreams and focus on keeping us afloat." Sarah seemed to sense the unspoken words, her expression softening. "We have a lot of catching up to do." As the chaos around us began to subside, replaced by a hushed reverence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope blooming within me. The nightmare was over, and a new chapter was beginning. One filled with possibilities I'd long since given up on. And this time, I had my brother by my side, our bond forged stronger than ever by the fires of adversity. In the weeks that followed, life began to regain some semblance of normalcy. The chaos of the aborted wedding faded into a distant memory, replaced by a newfound sense of hope and possibility. Levi, to his credit, handled the fallout with grace and resilience. While the wounds of Amanda's betrayal still stung, he refused to let her actions define him. Instead, he threw himself into his work, channeling his energy into something positive. And slowly but surely, the light began to return to his eyes. "I'm dating someone new," he announced one evening over dinner at my place. A shy smile played on his lips as he spoke. "Her name's Emily, and she's nothing like Amanda." I couldn't help but grin at the obvious affection in his tone. "That's great, bro. I'm happy for you." Levi nodded, his expression turning pensive. "She knows about what happened, and she doesn't care. Can you believe that?" I could, in fact, believe it. Emily was a kind-hearted woman who valued loyalty and honesty above all else, qualities that Amanda had sorely lacked. As the weeks turned into months, Levi's relationship with Emily blossomed, and I found myself welcomed into their little family with open arms. Gone were the days of feeling like a burden, an embarrassment to be hidden away. Emily treated me with genuine warmth and respect, and for the first time in years, I felt like I truly belonged. But perhaps the most unexpected development was the rekindling of my friendship with Sarah. After the disastrous wedding, we had exchanged numbers, promising to catch up over coffee. What started as a casual meetup quickly turned into something more, and before I knew it, we were spending more and more time together. "I can't believe we lost touch for so long," Sarah mused one evening as we strolled through the park, her hand warm in mine. I shrugged, a wistful smile tugging at my lips. Life has a way of pulling people apart, I guess. She nodded, her expression turning serious. "I'm just glad we found our way back to each other. You deserve to be happy, Ben." Those words, spoken with such genuine affection, stirred something deep within me, a longing for more, for a chance at the life I'd sacrificed so long ago. As the seasons changed and the leaves began to turn, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. The struggles, the heartache, the moments when I'd felt so utterly alone, they had all been leading up to this, a new beginning filled with promise and hope. And as I looked around at the people who had become my chosen family, Levi, Emily, and Sarah, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. We may not have had much in the way of material wealth, but we had something far more precious: each other. "You know, Levi," I said one evening as we sat on my porch, beers in hand, "we may not have much, but we have each other, and that's enough for me." He met my gaze, his eyes shining with a depth of understanding that only comes from shared experience. "You're right, Ben. You've always been right." With a contented sigh, he leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. "We may have lost our way for a while, but we found our way back. And that's all that matters." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the quiet street, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The nightmare was finally over, and a new chapter was beginning, one filled with love, laughter, and the unbreakable bond of family. And this time, I knew we were ready to face whatever life threw our way, together. I flinched as the plate crashed into the sink, shattering into jagged pieces. "You call this a meal? My dog wouldn't touch this," Helen sneered, her eyes narrowing as she glared at me. It was a familiar scene, one that had played out countless times since my father, Robert, had brought his new wife into our lives. What had once been a warm, inviting home now felt like a battlefield, with each day bringing fresh volleys of criticism and contempt. "I'm sorry, Helen," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll try harder next time." Her lips curled into a cruel smile. "You really think this is acceptable, Arya? This is pathetic, even for you." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. Helen had a way of deflating me, of making me feel small and inadequate, so I simply nodded and began cleaning up the mess, my hands trembling as I swept the shattered ceramic into a dustpan. As I worked, my mind drifted back to happier times, when it was just my father and me in our cozy home on the Oregon coast. Back then, life had been simple, if not always easy. Dad worked long hours on his fishing boat, leaving me to fend for myself more often than not. But I didn't mind. I relished the independence, the freedom to explore the rugged shoreline and lose myself in the rhythmic crash of the waves. Those were the moments when I felt truly alive, untethered from the weight of expectation and judgment. In those moments, I was just Arya. Not the disappointing daughter, the failure in the kitchen, or the constant source of frustration for my stepmother. But those moments were few and far between these days. Ever since Dad had brought Helen into our lives, everything had changed. She had swept in like a hurricane, rearranging our lives to suit her whims and leaving a trail of chaos in her wake. At first, her warmth and enthusiasm had been a welcome change. She had filled the void left by my mother's absence, offering a maternal presence that I had craved for so long. But that warmth had quickly given way to something far colder, far more insidious. Helen was never satisfied, never content. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. The meals I cooked were inedible, the house was never clean enough, and my grades were always subpar. I was a constant disappointment, a never-ending source of frustration. And yet, through it all, Dad remained strangely detached, as if he were oblivious to the turmoil brewing in our home. He was so consumed by his work, so desperate to provide for us, that he seemed blind to the emotional toll Helen's constant criticism was taking on me. As I finished cleaning up the mess, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the kitchen window. My eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, my cheeks stained with tears I hadn't even realized I'd shed. In that moment I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of disappointment and despair. But deep down, a flicker of hope still burned. I knew that one day I would escape this suffocating existence. One day I would find a place where I could breathe freely, where I could be myself without fear of judgment or ridicule. And so I clung to that hope, letting it sustain me through the darkest moments. Because as long as that flicker remained, there was a chance for a better life, a chance to find happiness and acceptance, a chance to finally be free. The sun-baked Nevada desert stretched out before me as the moving truck rumbled down the highway, leaving the lush green forests of Oregon behind. My heart ached with every mile that separated me from the familiar comfort of home, but Dad's words echoed in my mind like a mantra. "Arya, you know you can't stay here forever. Nevada's a whole new world, waiting for you." He was right, of course. As much as I loved the rugged beauty of the Oregon coast, I couldn't let the ghosts of my past with Helen hold me back. College was my chance to start fresh, to forge my own path and leave the pain and disappointment behind. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of new faces, unfamiliar streets, and endless syllabus readings. I felt adrift, a small fish in a vast ocean of opportunity and uncertainty. But then I met Sarah and Tim, two kindred spirits who quickly became my anchors in the storm. Sarah was a force of nature, with a sharp wit and a contagious enthusiasm that drew people to her like moths to a flame. From the moment we met in our shared dorm room, I knew she was someone special. Someone who wouldn't let me wallow in self-pity or doubt. "Come on, Arya," she'd say, grabbing my hand and dragging me out of my shell. "We're not going to spend another night holed up in this shoebox. There's a whole city out there waiting for us." And Tim, well, he was the perfect counterbalance to Sarah's boundless energy. Quiet and introspective, he had a way of grounding us both, reminding us to take a breath and appreciate the little moments that so often slipped by unnoticed. Together, the three of us were an unstoppable trio, exploring every nook and cranny of our new urban playground. We'd spend hours wandering the bustling city streets, marveling at the towering skyscrapers and the endless parade of humanity that flowed through them. It was during one of these aimless strolls that I first laid eyes on Greg. He was standing outside a trendy cafe, his tailored suit and perfectly coiffed hair setting him apart from the sea of students around him. There was an air of confidence about him, a magnetic pull that drew my gaze like a moth to a flame. "Who's that?" I asked Sarah, nodding in Greg's direction. She followed my gaze and let out a low whistle. "That's Greg Miller. He's some big-shot real estate developer. Word is he's got more money than God." I couldn't help but be intrigued. Greg represented everything that was foreign to me: wealth, power, and sophistication. He was a world away from the simple life I'd known on the Oregon coast, and yet there was something undeniably alluring about him. Little did I know that chance encounter would set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of my life. As the weeks turned to months, Greg and I grew closer, drawn together by our shared passion for urban planning and design. He was charming and attentive, showering me with compliments and lavish gifts that left me equal parts flattered and uneasy. "Be careful, Arya," Sarah would warn me, her brow furrowed with concern. "Guys like Greg always want something in return." But I brushed off her concerns, too dazzled by Greg's world of opulence and possibility to see the warning signs. It wasn't until much later that I realized just how right she had been. Because beneath Greg's polished exterior lurked a darkness, a twisted sense of entitlement and control that would slowly, insidiously, seep into every aspect of my life. And by the time I saw it for what it truly was, it was already too late. The net had been cast, and I was well and truly ensnared. The diamond on my finger sparkled like a captured star, refracting the warm Nevada sun into a kaleidoscope of colors. It was beautiful, extravagant, a symbol of Greg's wealth and status that should have filled me with joy. But as I admired the ring, a knot of unease twisted in my gut. "Arya, you deserve a wedding as grand as the love you and Greg share," Evelyn gushed, her perfectly manicured nails clinking against her champagne flute. "Money is no object. We'll make this the event of the season." Her words should have been reassuring, but there was an undercurrent of calculation in her tone that set me on edge. Evelyn was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who brooked no opposition when it came to getting her way. And in that moment I realized that this wedding wasn't just about celebrating my love for Greg, it was about solidifying my place in the Miller family, about proving my worth to the matriarch who held the purse strings. The months leading up to the big day were a whirlwind of fittings, tastings, and endless decisions. Evelyn was at the center of it all, orchestrating every minute detail with military precision. "The floral arrangements need to be more vibrant, more striking," she'd bark, waving a dismissive hand at the sample bouquets the florist had painstakingly assembled. "This is supposed to be a celebration, not a funeral." Her critiques were relentless, her standards impossibly high. No matter how hard I tried to meet her expectations, it was never quite enough. Greg, for his part, seemed content to let his mother take the reins. He'd nod along dutifully, offering the occasional placating remark whenever Evelyn's demands grew too outrageous. "Mother, I'm sure Arya has a vision for how she wants things to look," he'd say, draping a reassuring arm around my shoulders. But his words rang hollow, and we both knew that Evelyn's vision was the only one that mattered. As the big day drew closer, the tension between us mounted. Evelyn's criticisms grew more biting, her demands more outrageous. It was as if she was testing me, pushing me to my limits to see how much I could endure. And I, foolishly, endured it all. I told myself that it was just pre-wedding jitters, that once we were married and settled into our new life together, things would be different. Greg loved me, and that was all that mattered. But deep down, a voice whispered that this was only the beginning, that the control and manipulation I was experiencing now was merely a taste of what was to come. On the day of the wedding, I stood before the mirror in my opulent gown, a vision of ethereal beauty that should have taken my breath away. But all I could feel was a sense of dread, a heaviness that weighed on my shoulders like an anchor. "You look stunning, my dear," Evelyn cooed, sweeping into the room with a flurry of chiffon and perfume. "Greg is a lucky man." Her words were meant as a compliment, but they felt more like a warning, a reminder that I was the one who had been chosen, that my worth was inexorably tied to the approval of this woman who held such sway over my future. As I walked down the aisle, the weight of Evelyn's expectations seemed to press down on me with every step. Greg's smile was broad and genuine, but it did little to quell the rising sense of unease that threatened to consume me. Because in that moment, as I pledged my life and loved this man, I knew that I was also pledging my allegiance to Evelyn and to the twisted game of control and manipulation that she had so expertly mastered. Little did I know just how high the stakes of that game would become, or how steep the price of my compliance would be. The honeymoon was a brief reprieve, a fleeting taste of the happiness and freedom I had so naively expected married life to bring. But as soon as we returned to Evelyn's sprawling estate, the facade began to crack. At first, her demands were small, little critiques about how I organized the kitchen or the way I folded the towels in the linen closet. A true lady's home should be a sanctuary of order and grace, she'd sniff, her perfectly coiffed brow arched in disapproval. I tried to brush it off, to laugh it off as the harmless eccentricities of an overbearing mother-in-law. But as the weeks wore on, Evelyn's grip tightened, her criticisms growing more pointed, more personal. "Evelyn, can you help with the laundry today? I've got so much schoolwork," I timidly asked one afternoon, my arms laden with textbooks and class notes. She dismissed me with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand, her lips curled in a sneer of disdain. "Honestly, Arya, must I do everything around here? A woman of your age should be able to manage simple household tasks." The words stung like a slap to the face, but I swallowed my pride and retreated to the sanctuary of my study, my cheeks burning with shame. It was easier to retreat, to avoid confrontation, than to risk incurring Evelyn's wrath. But with each retreat, with each concession, I felt a piece of myself chipping away. The confident, ambitious woman I had once been was slowly being eroded by Evelyn's constant belittling and criticism. Greg, ever the dutiful son, remained willfully blind to his mother's toxic behavior. He was too busy climbing the corporate ladder, too consumed by his work to see the toll it was taking on me. "Mother knows best, Arya," he'd say with a dismissive chuckle whenever I dared to voice my concerns. "She's just trying to help you become the perfect wife and homemaker." But Evelyn's idea of help was twisted. Her version of perfection, a gilded cage that threatened to suffocate me. She wanted to mold me, to reshape me into her own image, a docile, subservient trophy wife whose sole purpose was to serve and obey. And slowly, insidiously, her poison seeped into every aspect of my life. My studies, once my passion and escape, became a burden, a source of frustration for Evelyn, who saw them as a distraction from my wifely duties. "You're spreading yourself too thin, dear," she'd snatching my textbooks from my hands and depositing them on a high shelf, out of reach. "Let's focus on what's truly important, shall we?" I wanted to rebel, to scream and fight and claw my way out of this gilded prison. But the more I struggled, the tighter Evelyn's grip became. She was always one step ahead, anticipating my every move and countering it with surgical precision. It was a slow, insidious form of torture, a war of attrition waged not with fists or weapons, but with words and subtle manipulations. And I, the naive, trusting fool that I was, fell victim to her machinations time and time again. Until finally one fateful night, everything came to a head. It was a simple mistake, a momentary lapse in concentration that led to a burnt casserole and a kitchen filled with acrid smoke. But to Evelyn, it was the ultimate transgression, an unforgivable failure that unleashed a torrent of fury unlike anything I had ever witnessed. "This is completely unacceptable," she raged, her perfectly coiffed facade crumbling as she hurled the ruined dish against the wall. "You're failing Greg and me at every turn. How can we expect you to be a proper wife and mother when you can't even manage a simple meal?" Greg, ever the loyal son, sided with his mother, his silence a deafening endorsement of her vitriol. And in that moment, something inside me broke. As Evelyn's cruel words washed over me, I felt the last vestiges of my former self slipping away, replaced by a hollow emptiness that threatened to consume me. I was adrift, lost in a sea of despair and hopelessness, with no lifeline in sight. But deep within that emptiness, a spark flickered, a glimmer of defiance, a refusal to surrender to the darkness that threatened to engulf me. And in that moment, I made a silent vow. One day, I would escape this gilded cage. One day, I would reclaim the life that had been stolen from me. And when that day came, Evelyn and her twisted machinations would be nothing more than a distant memory, a cautionary tale of what happens when one woman's lust for power and control goes too far. The shrill blare of the alarm clock jolted me awake, its insistent beeping cutting through the haze of exhaustion like a knife. I fumbled for the snooze button, my heart already pounding with dread at the realization that I had overslept. In the Miller household, punctuality was a cardinal sin, a sign of disrespect and incompetence that Evelyn would not tolerate. As I scrambled out of bed, my mind raced with excuses, desperate to find a way to placate the woman whose wrath I had come to fear more than anything. But it was too late. By the time I made it downstairs, the acrid smell of burnt food hung thick in the air, a telltale sign of my failure. What is the meaning of this? Evelyn's voice cut through the silence like a whip, her perfectly coiffed exterior betraying none of the fury that simmered beneath. I opened my mouth to explain, to beg for her understanding, but the words died on my lips as she swept into the kitchen, her eyes narrowing at the charred remains of what was supposed to be our evening meal. "This is completely unacceptable," she spat, her delicate features contorted into a mask of rage. "You're failing Greg and me at every turn. How can we expect you to be a proper wife and mother when you can't even manage a simple meal?" The words stung like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs and leaving me reeling. I wanted to defend myself, to remind her of the countless nights I had spent poring over textbooks, sacrificing sleep to keep up with the demands of my coursework. But Greg's silence was deafening, a tacit endorsement of his mother's vitriol that left me feeling utterly alone and powerless. "I'm sorry," I finally managed to choke out, my voice a mere whisper. "It won't happen again." Evelyn scoffed, her perfectly manicured nails drumming an impatient staccato on the marble countertop. "Sorry isn't good enough, Arya. Actions have consequences, and it's high time you learned that lesson." Her words hung in the air like a threat, a harbinger of the fresh torment that was surely to come. In that moment I felt the last vestiges of hope slipping away, replaced by a cold, hollow despair that threatened to consume me. The days that followed were a blur of punishment and humiliation, as Evelyn sought to break me down and rebuild me in her own twisted image. She stripped me of my autonomy, my freedom, dictating every aspect of my life with an iron fist. "You've proven yourself incapable of managing even the simplest tasks," she sneered, confiscating my car keys and credit cards. "From now on, you'll do as I say, when I say it. No arguments." And I, too beaten down and broken to resist, obeyed. I followed her orders to the letter, a hollow shell of the woman I once was, stripped of my ambitions and my sense of self. Greg, ever the loyal son, remained steadfastly on his mother's side, his silence a tacit endorsement of her cruelty. He watched impassively as she systematically dismantled my life, offering no comfort or support as I spiraled deeper and deeper into despair. The only solace I found was in the fleeting moments when Evelyn would leave the house, granting me a brief respite from her oppressive presence. In those precious hours, I would retreat to the sanctuary of my study, surrounding myself with the books and papers that had once been my passion. But even that small comfort was short-lived, as Evelyn soon caught wind of my distractions and moved swiftly to eliminate them. "This is unacceptable," she snapped, sweeping into the room and snatching my textbooks from my hands. "Your focus should be on your duties as a wife and mother, not these frivolous pursuits." With a flick of her wrist, she tossed the books onto the highest shelf, out of reach and out of sight. The message was clear. My dreams, my ambitions, were no longer welcome in this gilded prison she had crafted for me. As the weeks turned to months, I felt myself slipping further and further into a dark abyss, my sense of self eroding with each passing day. Evelyn's control was absolute, her grip tightening with every concession I made, every piece of myself I surrendered. But deep within that darkness, a flicker of defiance still burned, a spark of resistance that refused to be extinguished, no matter how relentless the onslaught. And it was that spark, that glimmer of hope, that would ultimately light the way to my salvation. The 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test seemed to mock me, their vibrant hue a stark contrast to the dull, lifeless existence I had resigned myself to. A child, a new life, a fresh start, should have filled me with joy, with hope for the future. But as the reality of my situation sank in, all I felt was a crushing sense of dread. "Evelyn, I'm pregnant," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper as I clutched the plastic stick in my trembling hands. For a moment, a heavy silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Then, like a dam bursting, Evelyn's fury erupted, her perfectly coiffed facade crumbling as she unleashed a torrent of vitriol. "A child? In this mess?" she spat, her eyes blazing with contempt. "You can barely run a household, and now you're bringing a baby into it?" Her words cut deep, reopening the wounds of self-doubt and inadequacy that she had so carefully cultivated over the past months. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to remind her of the dreams and ambitions I had once harbored. But the words died on my lips as she advanced on me, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my arm like talons. "This is unacceptable, Arya," she hissed, her voice low and menacing. "You've proven time and again that you're incapable of meeting even the most basic expectations. How can we trust you to care for a child?" Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to show weakness in the face of her onslaught. Deep down, a part of me still clung to the hope that this child, this innocent new life, might be the key to breaking free from Evelyn's suffocating grip. But as the days turned to weeks, it became painfully clear that my hopes were misplaced. Evelyn's disdain only intensified, her criticisms and demands growing more relentless with each passing day. "You're already failing as a mother, and the baby isn't even born yet," she would sneer, her perfectly painted lips curling into a cruel sneer as she scrutinized my every move. Greg, ever the dutiful son, remained steadfastly on his mother's side, offering no support or comfort as I navigated the physical and emotional turmoil of my pregnancy. His silence was deafening, a tacit endorsement of Evelyn's cruelty that left me feeling utterly alone and powerless. In those dark moments, when the weight of Evelyn's expectations threatened to crush me, I would retreat to the sanctuary of the nursery, surrounding myself with the soft pastels and gentle curves that promised a world of love and warmth for my unborn child. It was there, in the quiet solitude of that room, that I began to hatch my plan. A daring, desperate bid for freedom that would require every ounce of courage and resilience I could muster. With painstaking care, I began to squirrel away what little resources I could, a few dollars here, a spare set of clothes there, anything that might aid in my eventual escape. It was a dangerous game, one that demanded absolute secrecy and stealth, for if Evelyn caught even a whiff of my intentions, the consequences would be unthinkable. But the closer I drew to my due date, the more emboldened I became. The thought of bringing an innocent child into this toxic, oppressive environment was more than I could bear. I had to break free, for both our sakes. And so, I bided my time, playing the role of the obedient, subservient wife and mother-to-be that Evelyn demanded, all the while plotting my escape. Little did I know, however, that Evelyn was always one step ahead, her watchful eye ever vigilant for any sign of rebellion or defiance. It was a mere 2 weeks before my due date when she made her move, sweeping into the nursery like a force of nature and upending my carefully laid plans with surgical precision. "Looking for this?" she sneered, dangling a tattered backpack, the one I had stashed with my meager supplies, from her perfectly manicured fingertips. In that moment, my heart plummeted, the fragile hope I had clung to shattering like glass against the cold, hard reality of Evelyn's control. "Did you really think you could hide this from me, Arya?" she taunted, her voice dripping with contempt. "This pathetic little escape plan of yours? You're mine, now and forever, and it's high time you accepted that." As her words washed over me, a chill of dread settled deep in my bones. Evelyn had won, for now, but even as she tightened her grip, even as the walls of my gilded cage closed in around me, I knew that this was not the end. Somewhere, deep within me, that spark of defiance still flickered, fueled by the love I felt for the tiny life growing inside me. And one day, when Evelyn least expected it, that spark would ignite into a blaze of resistance, a fire that would consume her twisted machinations and set me free once and for all. The envelope felt like a lead weight in my trembling hands, its innocuous appearance belying the explosive contents within. Sarah's familiar scrawl adorned the front, a reassuring reminder that I was not alone in this desperate bid for freedom. "It's now or never, Arya. I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible over the thunderous pounding of my heart. You've got to do this for your baby and yourself. With trembling fingers, I tore open the envelope, revealing the neatly printed instructions that would serve as my lifeline, my path to salvation from Evelyn's oppressive clutches. Every detail was accounted for, from the burner phone and cash stashed in a nearby safe house, to the meticulously planned escape route that would lead me back to the safety of my father's embrace in Oregon. Sarah and Tim had thought of everything, their unwavering loyalty and support a beacon of hope in the darkness that had consumed my life. They were risking everything to help me, and I knew that failure was not an option. The plan was simple, but the execution would be anything but. Evelyn and Greg were scheduled to attend a high-profile real estate conference in Los Angeles, leaving me alone in the sprawling mansion for a precious 48-hour window. It would be my only chance, a narrow opening in the impenetrable fortress of Evelyn's control. And I knew that if I missed it, the consequences would be unthinkable. As the appointed day drew near, I felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on me like a physical force. Every moment was fraught with risk, every glance from Evelyn or Greg a potential landmine that could blow my carefully laid plans to smithereens. But I held firm, donning the mask of the obedient, submissive wife that Evelyn had so meticulously crafted for me. I played my role to perfection, lulling them into a false sense of security as the hours ticked down. Finally, the moment arrived. I stood on the front stoop, waving goodbye as Evelyn and Greg's sleek town car pulled away from the curb, whisking them off to their glamorous event. As soon as they were out of sight, I sprang into action, my heart pounding with a potent mix of adrenaline and fear. Every second counted. Every move had to be executed with precision and stealth. I grabbed the pre-packed bag from its hiding spot, my hands shaking as I slung it over my shoulder and made my way to the safe house Sarah had arranged. The journey was a blur of darkened alleys and nervous glances over my shoulder, each shadow a potential threat, each sound a harbinger of discovery. But finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the nondescript apartment building, its battered door the gateway to my newfound freedom. Sarah was waiting for me, her face a mask of concern and relief as she ushered me inside. "You made it," she breathed, enveloping me in a fierce embrace that threatened to shatter the fragile composure I had so carefully maintained. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to revel in the warmth of her embrace, to bask in the knowledge that I was no longer alone in my fight. But the respite was short-lived, as Tim's urgent voice cut through the silence. "We need to move," he said, his eyes darting nervously toward the window. "Evelyn's people are already combing the city. It's only a matter of time before they start putting the pieces together." And so with a heavy heart, I said goodbye to the city that had once promised so much, trading its glittering skyline for the open road and the promise of a new beginning. The journey back to Oregon was a blur of sleepless nights and constant vigilance as we zigzagged across the country, always one step ahead of Evelyn's relentless pursuit. Every mile that separated us from her oppressive grip felt like a weight lifted from my shoulders, but the fear of discovery never truly abated. It wasn't until I found myself standing on the familiar porch of my childhood home, my father's weathered face etched with concern and relief, that the full weight of my ordeal finally came crashing down. As he enveloped me in his strong, comforting embrace, the dam burst, and I wept. Great, heaving sobs that shook my very being. I wept for the innocence I had lost, for the dreams that had been so cruelly torn from my grasp, and for the child growing within me who would never know the pain and oppression that had marked the first chapter of their life. But amid the tears and the anguish, a glimmer of hope burned bright, a promise of a better future, free from the shackles of Evelyn's twisted machinations. It would be a long road, a journey fraught with challenges and hardships, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was in control of my own destiny. And as I cradled my swollen belly, feeling the gentle flutters of life within, I made a silent vow. Never again would I allow myself to be a victim. From this day forward, I would be the master of my own fate, forging a path paved with resilience and determination, a path that would lead me and my child to the freedom and happiness we so deserved. The gentle lapping of the waves against the rocky shoreline was a soothing melody, a familiar refrain that had been the soundtrack of my childhood. As I stood there, my toes buried in the cool sand, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. A peace I had thought lost forever in the depths of Evelyn's twisted machinations. "You're stronger than you think, Arya," Sarah murmured, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. "You've made it this far. You can make it all the way." Her words were a balm to the still raw wounds of my ordeal, a reminder that I was no longer that broken, cowering shell of a woman who had once been trapped in Evelyn's gilded cage. I was a survivor, a fighter, forged in the fires of adversity, and tempered by the love of those who had never lost faith in me. As the months passed, I slowly began to rebuild the life that had been so cruelly torn from my grasp. With my father's unwavering support and the unconditional love of my newborn son cradled in my arms, I found the strength to pursue my dreams once more. Sarah and Tim were by my side every step of the way, their loyalty and friendship a constant source of inspiration. Together, we navigated the challenges of starting over, each victory, no matter how small, a testament to the resilience that had carried us through our darkest hours. And as I immersed myself in the world of urban planning and design, a field that had once been my passion and my escape, I found a renewed sense of purpose, a driving force that propelled me forward, leaving the ghosts of my past firmly in the rearview mirror. But even as I rebuilt my life, piece by hard-won piece, the universe seemed determined to deliver a poetic justice that even I could never have foreseen. It started with a whisper, a rumor that rippled through the close-knit community of Oregon's coastal towns, a rumor that Evelyn and Greg's once mighty real estate empire was crumbling under the weight of their own hubris. At first, I paid it little mind, too consumed with the daily struggles of raising my son and rebuilding my career to spare much thought for the two people who had once held such power over me. But as the whispers grew louder, the details more concrete, I couldn't help but take notice. Apparently, one of Greg's latest developments, a sprawling luxury community built on prime waterfront property, had been devastated by a series of catastrophic floods. The damage was extensive, the result of shoddy construction and a blatant disregard for proper urban planning and environmental safeguards. As the lawsuits and investigations mounted, the once untouchable Millers found themselves in the crosshairs of public scrutiny and scorn. Their wealth and influence, built on a foundation of greed and deceit, crumbled like a house of cards in the face of their own hubris. And at the center of it all was a bitter irony that I couldn't help but savor. The very field that I had once been mocked and belittled for pursuing was now the instrument of their downfall. But even as the Millers' empire crumbled around them, the true extent of their twisted depravity was only just beginning to come to light. As the investigations deepened, a sordid web of lies and manipulation began to unravel, exposing the true depths of Evelyn's obsession with control and dominance. It seemed that Greg had been little more than a pawn in her twisted game, a means to an end in her relentless pursuit of power and wealth. With each new revelation, the once formidable matriarch found herself increasingly isolated, her carefully cultivated facade crumbling under the weight of her own deception. Even Greg, the once devoted son, turned on her in a desperate bid to salvage what little remained of his tattered reputation. And as the Millers' world imploded around them, the whispers of their downfall reached fever pitch, a cautionary tale of what happens when unchecked greed and hubris are allowed to fester unchecked. For me, it was a bittersweet vindication, a reminder that, in the end, the scales of justice have a way of balancing themselves, even in the face of the most formidable adversaries. As I watched the once mighty Millers reduced to mere shells of their former selves, cast out and shunned by the very society they had once lorded over, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a burden I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Because in their downfall, I saw the ultimate triumph of resilience over oppression, of light over darkness. It was a victory not just for me, but for every person who had ever found themselves trapped in the suffocating grip of someone else's twisted desires. And as I cradled my son close, his innocent eyes shining with the promise of a future untainted by the demons of my past, I made a silent vow, Never again would I allow myself to be a victim. From this day forward, I would walk with my head held high, a living embodiment of the strength and determination that had carried me through the darkest of times. For I was Arya Thompson, survivor, fighter, and master of my own destiny, and no force on earth, not even the twisted machinations of a woman like Evelyn Miller, could ever take that away from me again. Rachel, you might want to sit down. Ethan's been cheating on you with Claire. Tom's voice crackled through the phone. What? My own sister? How could you know that? I felt my heart drop to my stomach, the world spinning. I've seen them, multiple times. Tom's words hung in the air like a dense fog, obscuring my thoughts. I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady myself. The kitchen seemed oddly silent, despite the humming fridge and ticking clock. Ethan, I whispered to myself, the weight of the betrayal sinking in. My husband, the man I'd built my life with, was having an affair with Claire, my own sister, for whom I'd sacrificed so much. Tom's concern broke the silence. Are you okay, Rachel? No, I'm not okay, I said, my voice shaking. I need to get home. I hurried out of the hospital, barely nodding to colleagues, Tom's revelation echoing in my mind. My car ride home was a blur, the familiar streets of suburban Ohio passing unnoticed. As soon as I stepped into the house, Ethan looked up from the couch, his eyes meeting mine. There was a weariness there, but not guilt. Not yet. What's wrong? He asked, putting down the remote. Tom called, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. He told me everything about you and Claire. Ethan's face went pale, shock and then anger flashing across his features. What nonsense is this? It's not nonsense. Tom's seen you both, multiple times. My voice trembled with each word. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. This is crazy, Rachel. No, what's crazy is you betraying me with my own sister, I snapped. He fell silent, his eyes avoiding mine. That silence confirmed everything. Our children, Emily and Jack, who had been upstairs, came down to see what the commotion was about. Emily, her eyes wide with concern, asked, Mom, what's going on? Ethan's been cheating on me with Claire, I said, biting back tears. Emily and Jack stood there, stunned. Jack clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. Dad, how could you? Ethan stood, trying to speak. It's complicated. No, it's not, I interrupted. It's betrayal. It's breaking up this family. Tension hung heavy in the air. Claire, who had often been a source of tension, was now the reason behind this breaking point. Emily's eyes filled with tears, while Jack looked disgusted. We need to deal with this, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But right now, I need some air. I walked out onto the porch, the cool evening breeze hitting my face. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I needed strength, not just for myself but for Emily and Jack. Tom had done me a favor, albeit a painful one. There was no going back now. Choices had consequences, and Ethan and Claire were about to face theirs. For now, though, I just needed a moment to breathe and gather the strength to face what was next. Action was needed, and I was ready to uncover every shadow this betrayal had cast over my life. As I left the house, memories of my sacrifices for Claire flooded back. I had given up so much for her. I drove, my mind drifting to our childhood. Our parents had struggled, and I had dropped out of college to work, helping Claire finish school. And this was how she repaid me. I parked near a quiet park, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was Emily. Mom, where are you? Are you okay? Her voice was trembling. I needed some air, honey, I replied, my voice betraying the pain I felt. How are you holding up? We're worried about you. Jack's furious. Dad's just sitting here. I'll be back soon. We're going to get through this, I promise. After hanging up, I sat there watching the setting sun. The betrayal felt like a stabbing wound, but I was determined to find strength. Later that evening, I decided to confront Claire. I dialed her number, my fingers shaking. She picked up on the second ring. Rachel, hey, what's up? She asked, her voice annoyingly cheerful. Claire, we need to talk. Now, her tone changed instantly. Rachel, what's going on? I know about you and Ethan. There was silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. Rachel, it's not what you think. Save it. Just meet me tomorrow. We need to sort this out. I hung up before she could respond. The next day, at a small coffee shop, I waited for Claire. She walked in, looking anxious. Rachel, she started, but I cut her off. How could you do this to me, Claire, after everything I've done for you? Rachel, I'm sorry. It just happened, she said, her eyes avoiding mine. Just happened? That's all you have to say? I felt the anger surge. I never meant to hurt you. Ethan was just there for me when I needed someone. So, my own sister and my husband betray me, and that's your excuse? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. Tell me one thing, Claire. Was it worth it? She shook her head, tears falling. No, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Forgive you? I laughed bitterly. You've shattered any trust I had. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. With that, I left her there, crying. The betrayal from two people I loved most stung like a fresh wound, but their actions had consequences they would soon face. Back home, Ethan was trying to act normal, but the tension was palpable. Emily and Jack barely looked at him. Rachel, we need to talk, Ethan said, following me into the kitchen. There's nothing to talk about, Ethan. You made your choice. Can't we try to work this out? Work this out? I echoed, incredulous. You think there's fixing this? He looked defeated. I know I messed up, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it, I said sternly. You betrayed me and our family. Can we at least try counseling for the kids' sake? I looked at Emily and Jack, their hopeful eyes watching us. We'll see, I said finally, but things will never be the same. Days passed in a blur, the house filled with a fragile silence. I found solace talking to Tham, the only person who seemed to understand. You don't deserve this, Rachel, he said one evening at work. You're strong. You'll get through this. I hope so, I replied, because right now, I feel like my world is falling apart. Tham squeezed my hand reassuringly. You're stronger than you know. Just take it one day at a time. His words gave me a glimmer of hope. I realized that to move forward, I needed to confront the truth head-on. Ethan and Claire had shattered my trust, but I wasn't going to let them destroy my spirit. The road ahead would be tough, but I was determined to reclaim my life, piece by piece. The days following my confrontation with Claire were a haze of suspicion and heartbreak. I began to notice the subtle, unsettling closeness between Ethan and Claire. Their lingering glances, hushed conversations when they thought no one was looking. It all felt like a cruel, twisted joke. One afternoon, I came home early from the hospital. As I entered, I heard hushed voices from the living room. I quietly walked over, staying out of sight. I can't keep sneaking around like this, Claire whispered urgently. Just a little longer, Ethan replied. Rachel is too busy with work to notice. My heart clenched. I stepped into the room. Is that so? They both jumped, guilt plastered on their faces. Rachel? Ethan started, but I cut him off. Save it. I already know, I said sharply, turning on my heel and leaving before he could say anything else. At work, Tham noticed my stress. You okay, Rachel? He asked gently. I caught them talking. They don't even care about hiding it anymore. Tham shook his head sympathetically. You deserve better, Rachel. You can't let them keep doing this to you. That evening, I watched Ethan closely, observing his every move. He seemed fidgety, avoiding eye contact. Dinner was tense, the silence only broken by the clinking of utensils. Can we talk about this? Ethan tried again. I'm done talking, I replied curtly, throwing my napkin on the table and leaving the room. As days turned into weeks, my suspicion grew into certainty. Their deceit was like a dark cloud, suffocating any chance of normalcy. I began to watch them more intently, catching subtle signs of their intimacy. Shared glances, secretive smiles. One night, after another strained dinner, I overheard Emily and Jack. She's hurting so much, Jack. Can't you see it? Emily's voice was tight with worry. I know, Em. But what can we do? We can't force them to stop. I stepped into the room, and they both looked up, worry etched on their faces. Mom, we're just worried about you, Emily said softly. I know, sweetheart, but I need you both to stay strong. We'll get through this. Feeling overwhelmed, I found solace talking to Tham. His support was a lifeline in the chaos. Rachel, you need concrete evidence, he advised. If you're going to confront them, you need proof. He was right. Driven by the need for undeniable truth, I hired a private investigator. I paid for it secretly, taking money from our savings without Ethan noticing. Each day, while I worked, the investigator was digging into Ethan and Claire's illicit relationship. Meanwhile, Ethan's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He didn't know I was planning something. He continued belittling me, making snide comments about my lack of formal education. Maybe if you went to college, you'd understand some things better, he'd say with a sneer. I bit back my retorts, knowing I needed to bide my time. I buried myself in work and started taking online classes, secretly bettering myself for the future I envisioned without Ethan. Through it all, my children remained my anchor. Emily and Jack's concern for me fueled my determination to protect them from further pain. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the private investigator handed me the evidence. Photos, messages, everything was there, laid bare. It was like a punch to the gut, but also a validation of what I'd known all along. With proof in hand, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The pieces were falling into place. The time to act was drawing near. Ethan and Claire had no idea what was coming. I was ready to reclaim my life. The showdown was imminent, and I felt ready to confront the darkness head-on. The evidence sat heavy in my handbag, a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. The private investigator had done his job well. Photos, text messages, and even videos, undeniable proof of Ethan and Claire's affair. It was time to confront them, but I needed to plan carefully. That evening, as we sat at the dinner table, the air thick with unspoken words, Emily broke the silence. "Mom, you seem different lately," she said tentatively. "Is everything all right?" Ethan's eyes flicked to mine, wary. "Everything's fine, Emily," I said with a tight smile, "just thinking about the future." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, probably sensing the change in me. After dinner, as he sat watching TV, I pretended to browse on my laptop, but I was really taking my online class. Each lesson, every bit of newfound knowledge was a step towards independence, away from the toxic hold Ethan and Claire had over me. The next morning, Ethan's belittling was in full force. "Are you seriously still taking those online classes? What's the point at your age?" I looked him straight in the eye. "The point is my growth, Ethan, something you wouldn't understand," he scoffed. "Right, like that's going to change anything." "It's going to change everything," I murmured more to myself than him. At work, Tom noticed the shift in my demeanor. "You seem different today, Rachel. What's going on?" "I've got the evidence, Tom. Now, it's time to plan my future," I said with a determined glint in my eyes. He gave a supportive nod. "Ready when you are." Later that week, the private investigator had gathered one last piece of evidence, a dated exchange between Ethan and Claire, laughing about their deception. The sheer contempt they had for me was infuriating. I couldn't waste time. I called my lawyer and set the wheels in motion for filing a divorce. Timing was everything, and I wanted my exit to be powerful, coordinated. That evening, as Ethan rambled about his day, clearly oblivious, Jack and Emily exchanged worried glances. They knew I was up to something, but didn't pry. The final straw came one night when Ethan and Claire were having another of their secret phone conversations. I stood outside the bedroom, listening. "Ethan, when is she going to sign off on that retirement money?" Claire's voice was shrill. "Relax, Claire. She's clueless. It'll be ours soon enough," Ethan reassured her. My blood boiled. Retirement money they thought was theirs? Not if I had anything to do with it. The next morning, Emily and Jack were eating breakfast when I made my announcement. "Kids, things are going to change soon." Emily looked up from her cereal, her eyes wide. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I'm filing for divorce." Both of them stared at me, shocked. "Finally," Jack muttered under his breath. "What about Dad?" "Don't worry about your father," I said firmly. "I've got it under control." I spent that day finishing the paperwork and discussing my plan with my lawyer. Meanwhile, I continued my classes in secret, prepping for a future without Ethan. The day I submitted the divorce papers, I felt a surge of empowerment. The formal proof of Ethan and Claire's affair would ensure I got my fair share in the settlement. My online studies, too, were a secret weapon, allowing me to step into a new role when the time came. Finally, the paperwork was filed. The storm was brewing, and Ethan and Claire had no idea what was coming. I was ready to reveal the truth and sever the toxic ties that had bound me for so long. The showdown was near, and I was prepared to reclaim my life and dignity. The moment of truth had arrived. I had meticulously planned this confrontation, ensuring every detail was in place. Emily and Jack were out with friends, giving me the space I needed. I set the evidence on the dining table, waiting for Ethan to come home. When he walked through the door, he seemed surprised to see me standing there, a strange calmness about me. "Rachel, what's going on?" "We need to talk," I said, motioning for him to sit. He frowned but complied. "What's this about?" I slid the folder of evidence across the table. Open it. As he leafed through the contents, his face fell, the color draining away. What is this? Proof of your affair with Claire, I said, my voice steady. And proof that you've both betrayed me in ways I can't even comprehend. Ethan slammed the folder shut. This isn't what it looks like, Rachel. Save it, Ethan. You've said enough. I took a deep breath. I'm filing for divorce. He scoffed, trying to regain his composure. What? You think you can just leave and take everything with you? I don't think I know, I replied. I also know you'll lose everything once this gets to court. Ethan's eyes blazed with anger. You think you're so clever, don't you? It's not about cleverness. It's about justice, I said, standing up. I'm done being your fool. He stood too, trying to tower over me. You'll regret this, Rachel. No, Ethan. You'll be the one regretting everything. With that, I walked out, leaving him to stew in the reality of his actions. Outside, I called Emily and Jack, asking them to come home. It was time for the final reveal. When they arrived, I gathered them in the living room. Kids, there's something you need to see. I handed them the folder, watching as their expressions shifted from confusion to shock. Mom, how could he? Jack seethed. How could he betray you like this? Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. We support you, Mom, whatever you need. Thank you, I said softly. I just need you both to stay strong. We'll get through this. The next day, I handed over the evidence to my lawyer. The gears were set in motion for a divorce that would lay bare Ethan's and Claire's betrayal. At work, Tom was my rock, giving me that much-needed support. You did the right thing, Rachel, he said, squeezing my hand. Now it's time to focus on you. I nodded, feeling a small spark of hope. The decision was made. Now it was all about execution. In the following days, Ethan's anger morphed into attempts at manipulation. He tried to paint himself as the victim in front of Emily and Jack. Your mother's overreacting, he'd say. This was all a misunderstanding. But the kids knew better now. They'd seen the evidence, felt the betrayal. We're not falling for your lies anymore, Dad, Jack retorted one evening. Ethan, realizing he was losing grip, turned desperate. Rachel, think of the family. Can't we just move past this? No, Ethan. The family deserves better than this deceit. I deserve better, I said firmly. With that, the legal battle began. Through it all, I kept my focus. My online classes were nearing completion, a symbol of the new life I was building. Ethan and Claire would face the consequences of their actions, but I was already looking ahead. It was time to reclaim my life, rebuild from the ground up, and show Ethan that his betrayal was only the beginning of my transformation. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to face it head-on, fueled by a newfound strength. The storm had begun, but I was the eye of it, calm and in control. The day of my official retirement had arrived, and I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. My colleagues at the hospital had arranged a small farewell, filled with kind words and well wishes. Tom gave me a knowing look as I finally said goodbye to the place that had been my second home. Returning home, I felt a sense of calm, but that calm was short-lived. As I walked through the door, I found Ethan and Claire waiting for me in the living room. Their faces were smug, clearly planning something. Rachel, you're done today. You're just a burden now without your job. Pack your stuff and leave, Ethan said, his voice dripping with arrogance. Claire stood beside him, arms crossed. Yeah, Rachel, it's time you let go. This house will be better off without you. I felt a surge of anger, but kept my composure. So, you're going to throw me out and live off my earnings? Is that your plan? Ethan smirked. You have no choice. Without missing a beat, I pulled out the divorce papers and the evidence of their affair, dropping them on the coffee table. Actually, you're the one with no choice. Their faces went white as they scanned the documents. You think this will scare me? Ethan sneered. It's not about scaring you, Ethan. It's about justice and getting what I deserve. At that moment, Emily and Jack walked in, their presence a heavy support system. Mom's right. We're standing by her, Jack said, stepping forward. Emily nodded. This madness has to end. Ethan's smugness turned to desperation. You're both turning against your own father? Claire tried to chime in. Rachel, be reasonable. We can work something out. Reasonable, I scoffed. You don't get to ask for reason after what you've done. Ethan tried one last time. Rachel, think about the future. The kids. My future is with my children, away from your deceit, I cut him off. The shock on their faces was satisfying, but I knew the battle had only just begun. The legal process would be long and grueling, but I was ready for it. My divorce lawyer assured me we had a strong case, and the court would see Ethan and Claire for what they truly were. As the weeks passed, Ethan and Claire found themselves increasingly isolated. Emily and Jack rallied around me, giving me strength. Meanwhile, I was quietly wrapping up my online studies and planning my next steps. One evening, as I sat with Emily and Jack, I outlined my plans. I'm going to move out soon, get my own place, start fresh. Jack nodded, his eyes filled with pride. Whatever you decide, Mom, we're with you. Emily squeezed my hand. We'll visit often. You deserve this new start. It wasn't long before the day came to move out. I packed my belongings, each box a symbol of letting go of the past. Ethan and Claire watched, their expressions a mix of anger and disbelief. They had underestimated me, and now they were facing the consequences. I found a small, cozy apartment across town. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. I began to understand the power of freedom and the peace that came with it. Meanwhile, Ethan and Claire struggled. The weight of their actions bore down on them, making their lives increasingly difficult. I, on the other hand, flourished. My online classes led to a new career, one that brought fulfillment and independence. I stayed in close contact with Emily and Jack, their support a constant reminder of the strength of family. As for Ethan and Claire, their lives began to crumble. The financial strain, the social disgrace, everything they had built on lies was falling apart. The road ahead was clear, and I walked it with my head held high, knowing I had turned the darkness of betrayal into the light of new beginnings. Moving into my new apartment felt like stepping into a new life. It was small but cozy, with just enough space for me and a fresh start. I decorated it with simple, meaningful items that brought me peace. One evening, while unpacking the last of my boxes, the phone rang. It was Emily. "Mom, you should see how they're struggling," she said, her voice a mix of concern and vindication. "I'm not surprised," I replied. "They built their lives on deceit. It was bound to collapse." Emily paused. Dad called. He sounded desperate. "He wants to talk." I sighed. Desperate or not, he made his choices. Days turned into weeks, and while Ethan and Claire floundered, I thrived. The new career I had studied for brought unexpected fulfillment. I was finally doing something for myself, and it felt empowering. One morning, as I was leaving my building, I saw Ethan waiting outside. His appearance was disheveled, a stark contrast to the confident man he used to be. "Rachel, please," he started, desperation seeping through his voice. "Can we talk?" I stopped, considering. "What is there to talk about, Ethan?" "Everything's falling apart. Claire and we can't handle this. I need your help." "You need my help?" I echoed, incredulous. "After everything you put me through?" He shuffled awkwardly. "I know I messed up, but can't we find a way to move forward?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "I've already moved forward. I've made my life better while you chose to destroy yours. It's your turn to face the consequences." Ethan's shoulders sagged. I didn't think it would end like this. "Actions have consequences, Ethan. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a life to live." I walked away feeling a strange mix of pity and vindication. That evening, Emily and Jack came over for dinner. We talked, laughed, and enjoyed each other's company. It felt like old times, but stronger somehow. "Mom, you seem so much happier," Jack observed. "I am, Jack. It's amazing what cutting out the toxicity can do." "I'm proud of you, Mom," Emily said, her eyes shining with admiration. As they helped me clean up, I felt gratitude for their unwavering support. Together, we spoke about my final plan to ensure Ethan and Claire faced the full brunt of their actions. The next day, I put the plan into motion. Using the evidence of their affair, I exposed Ethan's misuse of our marital funds and his affair with Claire to his employers and acquaintances. It wasn't long before whispers and rumors started spreading, tarnishing their reputations. Ethan lost his job, unable to hide from the disgrace. Claire, once so confident, now faced the harsh judgment of friends and family. Their once smug expressions were now replaced with despair. I, on the other hand, felt a sense of liberation. My career was flourishing, and I savored every moment of my new life. I had turned the pain they caused into fuel for success, and it showed. One evening, as I relaxed with a cup of tea, my phone buzzed. A message from Tham. "Proud of you, Rachel. You did it." I smiled, feeling the weight of those words. I had done it. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal. The struggle had been immense, but so was the reward. As I sipped my tea, Emily and Jack arrived, bringing warmth and joy into my apartment. We spent the evening reminiscing, laughing, and looking forward to the future. Ethan and Claire were now just shadows of a painful past. My present was bright and my future even brighter. I had claimed my victory, and with my children by my side, I knew I had truly come home. The revenge hadn't just been about proving a point. It had been about reclaiming my life. I had done both, and in doing so, had found a new and stronger version of myself. My journey was far from over, but now it was a journey of hope and strength. Ethan's fall from grace happened more swiftly than even I had anticipated. The exposure of his affair and financial misdeeds sent shockwaves through our community. Every whisper, every scornful look, they were his new reality. One evening, as I sat in my apartment savoring a peaceful moment, my phone rang. It was Tom. "Rachel, you won't believe what I just heard," he said, almost breathless with excitement. "What is it?" I asked, curiosity piqued. "Ethan's reputation is in freefall. His former employer is pressing charges for embezzlement. And Claire, she's being ostracized by everyone around her." I inhaled deeply. "Karma," I said simply. "Indeed," Tom agreed. "You played this perfectly." As days turned into weeks, Ethan and Claire's lives unraveled. Without a job, and under the scrutiny of the law, Ethan's smugness had disappeared. Claire, too, faced the brunt of social disgrace. They had underestimated me, and now they were suffering the consequences of their betrayal. One morning, as I was walking to my new office, I saw Ethan waiting by the door. He looked disheveled, his eyes desperate. "Rachel, please, I need to talk to you," he pleaded. I stopped, maintaining a safe distance. "What is it, Ethan?" "Everything's fallen apart. I lost my job, Claire's left. Please, I need help," he begged, tears welling up in his eyes. "Help? After everything you and Claire did to me?" I asked, incredulous. "Rachel, I'm begging you. I have nothing left," he said, his voice cracked. I paused, then spoke firmly. "You should have thought about that before you threw away our family. I have my own life now, Ethan. It's time you face the consequences of your actions." Turning away, I walked into the building, leaving him in the cold. The sight of his desperation didn't fill me with joy, but with a sense of finality. He was reaping what he had sown. Inside, my colleagues greeted me warmly, unaware of the drama unfolding outside. My career was blossoming, a testament to my resilience and determination to build a future for myself. Later that evening, Emily and Jack came over. We discussed everything that had happened, their support a comforting constant. "Mom, you're amazing," Emily said, her eyes full of admiration. "Thanks, sweetheart. It's been a long road, but we made it," I replied, smiling. Jack nodded. "You've shown us the importance of strength and self-respect." As we sat together, I felt a wave of contentment. My life's chapter with Ethan and Claire had come to a fitting end. They were mere shadows now, insignificant in the face of my newfound strength. Over the next few months, my plans continued to flourish. I invested my savings wisely and started a small consulting business that quickly gained traction. My life was no longer defined by betrayal, but by the success and love I had built with Emily and Jack. One evening, as I reflected on everything that had happened, Tom called. "Rachel, you've come so far. I'm truly proud of you." "Thank you, Tom. I couldn't have done it without your support," I said gratefully. "You deserve every bit of this happiness. Onward to even better things," he replied. Closing the call, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I had navigated through the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future. As I lay in bed that night, I realized that the journey of revenge wasn't just about causing Ethan and Claire to face their demons. It was about reclaiming my power, my identity, and in doing so, I had discovered the true essence of resilience and self-worth. Ethan and Claire had tried to destroy me, but I had emerged unbroken, resilient, and stronger than ever. My new life was a testament to that. The ultimate revenge wasn't in their downfall, but in my rise. With Emily and Jack by my side, I looked forward to the future with hope and excitement. We had all grown from this experience, and now there was nothing but light on the horizon. "We need to talk. Meet me at the diner. Now." The cryptic text from Brandon sent a chill down my spine. After 3 years of marriage, those 6 words carried an ominous weight that filled me with dread. I stared at my phone, my mind racing with possibilities as I sat alone at my desk, the office now empty except for the faint hum of computers. What could be so urgent that he needed to meet right away? A million scenarios played out in my head, each worse than the last. Was he having an affair? Did something happen to one of our families? Or was this about the money issues we'd been having lately? With shaky hands, I typed back a simple, "Okay," and grabbed my things, the fluorescent lights flickering as I made my way to the parking lot. The drive to the diner seemed to stretch on forever, my knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. When I finally arrived, Brandon was already there, sitting in a corner booth with his head down. He looked different, disheveled, unkempt, not at all like the put-together man I fell in love with. "Brandon?" I said cautiously as I slid into the booth across from him. "What's going on?" He didn't even look up, his eyes glazed over as he spoke in a flat, emotionless tone. "Ava, I've made some choices that I can't fully explain right now, but I need time to figure things out." My heart pounded in my chest as the pieces started to fall into place. The late nights at the office, the unexplained absences, the increasing distance between us, all signs I had willfully ignored, not wanting to face the truth. Are you having an affair?" I choked out, fighting back tears. Finally, he met my gaze, and what I saw in his eyes shattered me. Cold indifference. No warmth, no love, just emptiness. "I'm sorry, Ava," he said flatly, "but I need to do this. For me." In that moment, the man I loved was a stranger, and I knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. I sat in stunned silence as Brandon's words hung in the air like a thick fog. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers and explanations, but the hollowness in his eyes told me it would be pointless. Whatever was driving him had already consumed the man I once knew. I don't understand," I finally managed, my voice cracking with emotion. "How could you do this to us? To our marriage?" He shook his head dismissively. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but it is what it is. I have my reasons, Ava, reasons I can't get into right now." The anger began to bubble up inside me, replacing the hurt and confusion. "You can't just drop a bombshell like that and expect me to be okay with it," I hissed, struggling to keep my voice down. "We're supposed to be partners, Brandon. What happened to for better or worse?" "Things change," he said flatly. "People change. I've changed, Ava, and I need you to respect that." I recoiled as if he'd slapped me. Respect it? After everything we'd been through together, after all the dreams and plans we'd made, he expected me to just accept his betrayal? "Go to hell," I spat, sliding out of the booth. I couldn't bear to look at him any longer, this empty shell of the man I loved. As I stormed out of the diner, the tears finally spilled over, blurring my vision. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I scrolled through my contacts. There was only one person I could trust with something like this. "Mason? It's Ava. I need your help." The words caught in my throat as I choked back a sob. But I knew in that moment, as painful as it was, that I had to find out the truth. No matter what it took, no matter where the path led, I would get to the bottom of Brandon's deception, and he would pay for what he'd done to me. To us. 3 days later, I found myself sitting across from Mason at a small cafe, my hands trembling as I clutched the manila envelope he'd just handed me. Part of me didn't want to open it, didn't want to confront the harsh reality that was no doubt contained within. But I knew I had to be strong. For myself, if nothing else. "You sure you want to see what's in there?" Mason asked gently, his brow furrowed with concern. "Once you open that envelope, there's no going back." I steeled myself and gave a resolute nod. "I have to know, Mason. I have to know what kind of man I really married." With a heavy sigh, he leaned back in his chair. "All right, then. But I gotta warn you, it's not pretty." My hands shook as I slid the stack of photos out, my breath catching in my throat. There was Brandon, clear as day, in a tight embrace with a younger, vivacious woman I didn't recognize. They looked happy, intimate. His arms were wrapped around her, his lips pressed against hers in a passionate kiss. The photos told the whole sordid story: secret meetups at hotels, hushed conversations in darkened parking lots, lingering touches that spoke of deeper intimacy. My heart shattered into a million pieces as the truth finally hit me. Brandon hadn't just strayed. He'd stepped out of our marriage completely, lying and deceiving me at every turn. Who is she?" I managed to choke out, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. Mason's expression was grim. Her name is Gwen Taylor. That's all I could dig up so far, but it gets worse. He pulled out a sheaf of documents, bank statements, accounting records, all pointing to the same inescapable conclusion. Brandon had been embezzling funds, siphoning money from the charity we'd started together into his own personal accounts. That low-life son of a... The curse died on my lips as the weight of his betrayal crashed over me in waves. Not only had he thrown away our marriage for this Gwen, but he'd been robbing from the very cause we'd both devoted ourselves to for years. The sting of his deception burned white-hot, quickly replacing my sadness with an intense, all-consuming rage. He wanted to throw everything away and start over? Fine. If that's how he wanted to play it, I would make sure Brandon's new life was a living hell. No more Mrs. Nice Ava. It was time to fight fire with fire. With the photos and financial records burning a hole in my purse, I knew I had to act fast. Brandon wasn't going to get away with this betrayal, not if I had anything to say about it. And the best way to take him down? Go straight for the heart of his deception, Gwen Taylor herself. Tracking her down wasn't easy, but eventually Mason was able to get me an address. A quaint little studio apartment on the other side of town. Perfect for a young, free-spirited woman like her, I imagined. The thought made my blood boil, but I pushed it aside. I needed to keep my cool for this to work. I spent the next few days watching her from a discreet distance, studying her routines and habits. Then, one sunny afternoon, I saw my opening. Gwen was out front tending to a small garden box, humming to herself as she pruned and watered her plants. This was my chance. "Excuse me?" I called out in my warmest, most grandmotherly voice as I approached. "I'm terribly sorry to bother you, dear." Gwen looked up, startled, but her expression quickly softened into a friendly smile. "No bother at all. Can I help you with something?" Putting on my best befuddled act, I wrung my hands anxiously. "Well, you see, I'm having the hardest time with my phone. This silly new technology, I can never seem to get the hang of it. I don't suppose you might be able to lend an old lady a hand?" Her smile widened, and she immediately set down her trowel. "Of course. Here, let me take a look." And just like that, she was hooked. Over the next few weeks, I became a familiar, if slightly befuddled, presence in Gwen's life. A kindly older woman who struggled with mundane tasks, in constant need of her youthful expertise and patience. All the while, I was studying her, probing for insecurities and vulnerabilities that I could later exploit. It didn't take long to realize that despite her vivacious outer confidence, Gwen was harboring some deep-seated doubts and fears surrounding Brandon and their relationship. Fears that a few well-placed comments from me began to nurture and cultivate. "You know, dear, that husband of yours works such terribly long hours," I'd tut with feigned concern. "A young, beautiful thing like you must get so awfully lonely." Or, "I couldn't help but notice that you two rarely seem to go out together anymore. I do hope everything is all right between you." Little by little, I chipped away at her rosy view of Brandon's duplicity, planting seeds of doubt and suspicion. And as the weeks rolled by, I could see the strain, the growing paranoia, beginning to show in the bags under her eyes and the worried crease of her brow. My revenge was taking shape, one calculated move at a time. Brandon wanted to shatter my world? Well, two could play at that game. The first sign that my plan was working came about a month after I started befriending Gwen. I was out running errands when I spotted her car parked outside a trendy cafe downtown. As I got closer, I could see her through the window, seated at a table with Brandon. Only instead of their usual loving gazes, she was glaring at him with thinly veiled anger, while he looked increasingly uncomfortable. I quickly ducked into the cafe and found a discreet table nearby, pretending to study the menu while straining my ears to catch their conversation. "Been working late a lot lately?" Gwen was saying, her voice low but laced with accusation. "More than usual." Brandon shifted in his seat. "It's just been a busy time at the office, babe. You know how it gets sometimes." "Do I?" She arched an eyebrow. "Because it seems like no matter how busy you are, you always find time to grab drinks with the guys or play poker with your buddies." He opened his mouth to protest, but Gwen cut him off with a withering look. "Don't even try to deny it, Brandon. I'm not an idiot." There was an uncomfortable pause before he sighed heavily. "Gwen, you know I would never..." I mean, you're the only one for me. Am I? She laughed bitterly. Because a little bird told me you haven't exactly been faithful. My heart raced as I watched Brandon's expression morph into one of shock and panic. What? No, that's crazy. Who told you that? So it's not true then? Gwen challenged. When he didn't respond, she shook her head in disgust. That's what I thought. She started gathering her things, and Brandon reached across the table to grab her arm. Gwen, wait, let me explain. But she yanked free from his grasp, eyes blazing with fury. Explain what, Brandon? How you've been lying and cheating this whole time. Save it. We're done. With that, she stormed out of the cafe, leaving Brandon slumped in his chair, head in his hands. As much as I should have felt guilty for destroying their relationship, I couldn't help but revel in the sweet taste of revenge. This was only the beginning. Brandon had no idea what hell was about to rain down on him. Over the next few weeks, the hairline fractures I'd created in his life spiraled into gaping chasms. Gwen went scorched earth, taking to social media to plaster every lurid detail of Brandon's betrayal across the internet. His reputation in the community began to crumble, longtime friends and colleagues distancing themselves from the scandal. And through it all, I sat back and watched with cold satisfaction as the man who had so callously dismantled my world saw his own existence utterly unravel. Revenge, I decided, tasted a lot like poetic justice. With Gwen's very public meltdown, Brandon's life was rapidly unraveling before my eyes. But I knew I couldn't stop there, not when he still had his precious job and reputation at the charity to cling to. No, to truly destroy him, I needed to burn that last, tenuous thread of normalcy he was grasping at. Luckily for me, Mason had uncovered some very interesting financial irregularities in his investigation. All I had to do was slip an anonymous tip to the right people, and Brandon's carefully constructed facade would come crashing down around him. It was almost too easy, really. A few encrypted emails from an untraceable account, attaching those damning bank statements and ledgers that proved he'd been siphoning funds. Then I just sat back and waited for the dominoes to start falling. The first indication that my plan was working came about a week later when I overheard Brandon on a heated phone call as I passed by his open office door. What do you mean there's a discrepancy? He snapped at whoever was on the other end of the line. I've been managing those books for years. There's no way. His voice trailed off as he seemed to realize I was there, and he shot me a furtive glance before lowering his voice to an urgent whisper. I simply gave him my sweetest, most innocent smile as I continued down the hallway, fighting to suppress my smirk of satisfaction. Over the next few days, the tensions at the office became increasingly palpable. Meetings that stretched long into the night, raised voices echoing from behind closed doors, accusing looks and whispers from Brandon's colleagues whenever he passed by. Clearly, the investigation into the missing funds was gaining steam. Finally, everything came to a head one afternoon when I arrived for a meeting, only to find a grim-faced Brandon being escorted from the building by two burly security guards. "You can't do this," he shouted, struggling against their grip as they propelled him towards the exit. "I'll be ruined, you hear me? Ruined." I watched the scene unfold with a mixture of pity and vindictive pleasure. This sorry, pathetic wreck of a man was the same one who had so carelessly destroyed my life, my dreams, all in pursuit of his own selfish desires. Now he was getting a taste of the pain and humiliation he'd put me through. As the doors swung shut behind Brandon's shameful exit, his boss, Liam, I think his name was, turned to face the muttering crowd that had gathered. "I know this has been a difficult situation to grapple with," he said, his voice strained but authoritative. "Brandon's actions have been a shocking betrayal of everything we stand for at this organization. But I promise you, we will get through this, together." His gaze landed on me briefly, and I gave him a solemn nod of understanding. Of course, Liam had no idea of the role I'd played in orchestrating this entire spectacle. As far as he was concerned, I was just another appalled but loyal employee. Little did he know I was the one truly pulling the strings. And Brandon's downfall was just the beginning. In the weeks following Brandon's very public firing, I could barely suppress my glee at watching his life go up in flames. His professional reputation was in tatters, his personal life a scorched wasteland thanks to Gwen's unrelenting campaign against him on social media. He was well and truly alone, with no one left in his corner, which made it the perfect time to twist the knife one final time. I arranged a clandestine meeting at a quiet bar on the outskirts of town, sending Brandon a terse message with only a time and location. A part of me wondered if he would even show, but my curiosity got the better of me. I had to see the broken man he'd become with my own eyes. Sure enough, right on schedule, Brandon shambled through the door, looking like a ghost of his former self. His eyes were sunken and haunted, his hair disheveled, a thick beard obscuring his once handsome features. As his gaze landed on me, I gave him a tight smile, gesturing for him to join me in the dimly lit back corner. "You look like hell," I remarked as he slid into the booth across from me, "though I suppose that's to be expected for someone in your situation." Brandon flinched as if I'd struck him. "Just say what you have to say, Ava. I don't have the energy for your games anymore," I tutted softly, shaking my head. "No games, Brandon. I just thought you deserved to know the truth, the whole truth." Leaning forward, I looked him straight in the eye, my voice low and even. "It was me, Brandon. I'm the one who brought your world crashing down around you." For a long moment, he simply stared at me in stunned silence. Then, almost involuntarily, a bitter laugh escaped his cracked lips. "You? But how?" "How do you think?" I said coolly. "I hired Mason to investigate you after that night at the diner. He found out about your affair with Gwen, your little embezzlement scheme, all of it. From there, it was just a matter of applying the right pressure in the right places." Understanding bloomed in his eyes, quickly followed by disbelief and anger. You manipulated Gwen? Got her to turn against me?" I shrugged. "She was an easy mark. Just a few subtle comments here and there about your supposed indiscretions. Let her insecurities do the rest. As for your job," I couldn't help but smile. "Well, let's just say those financial records spoke for themselves once they landed in the right hands." You're a monster," Brandon spat, looking at me with a mix of revulsion and fear. "Everything I've lost, my job, my reputation, all because you couldn't let go of your petty need for revenge." Rage bubbled up inside me at his hypocrisy. "Petty? You threw away our marriage, Brandon. You cheated and lied and stole, and you have the audacity to call me petty?" I leaned across the table, my voice a low hiss. "You brought this on yourself. Maybe next time you'll think twice before betraying the person you vowed to cherish." With that, I slid out of the booth and started towards the exit. Brandon made no move to stop me, sitting there shell-shocked as the weight of his actions and the consequences I'd meticulously crafted finally crushed down on him. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication, of justice served. Brandon had it coming, and I made sure he paid the price for his transgressions. My debt to him was settled. Now it was time to move on and rebuild my life, without him dragging me down anymore. The months following my final confrontation with Brandon were a whirlwind of change and upheaval. With him officially out of my life, I found myself adrift, unmoored from the steady routine I'd grown so accustomed to over the years. At first, the solitude and silence were suffocating, a constant reminder of everything I'd lost. But slowly, gradually, I began to rediscover the strong, self-assured woman I was before Brandon's betrayal. The one who didn't need a man's validation to be happy and whole. It started with leaving my job at the charity. The place held too many painful memories, too many reminders of the life I thought I had. Instead, I landed a position at a prestigious bank downtown as a financial advisor. A fresh start in a new environment, surrounded by colleagues who knew nothing of the sordid drama. Well, if it isn't the infamous Ava Thompson, a warm, friendly voice called out on my first day as I made my way to the employee lounge. I turned to see a smiling older gentleman regarding me with an appraising look. "James Connors," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "I'll be overseeing your team, though from what I've heard, you'll probably be running circles around me before too long." I couldn't help but blush at the compliment as I shook his hand firmly. "Well, I certainly plan to give it my best effort, Mr. Connors." He waved a dismissive hand. "Please, call me James. We're a pretty informal bunch around here." His eyes twinkled with mirth. "I have a feeling you and I are going to get along just fine." True to his word, James became something of a mentor to me over those first few months. His casual guidance and steadying presence helped me find my footing, reminding me of the confidence and capabilities I'd forgotten in the wake of Brandon's deception. In turn, my renewed sense of self and purpose bled into other areas of my life as well. I rekindled old friendships that had fallen by the wayside, making more of an effort to stay connected with people like Rachel, whose support had been so invaluable. "You seem lighter lately," she observed one evening over drinks at a trendy cocktail bar. "Like there's been a weight lifted off your shoulders." I smiled, nodding slowly as I took a sip of my martini. "I think there has been. For so long, I let Brandon's actions and choices weigh me down, define my reality. But not anymore." Rachel reached across the table to give my hand an affectionate squeeze. "I'm proud of you, you know that? Not many people could have come through something like that with their strength and spirit intact." Her words warmed me, and in that moment, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. For her, for James, and the new path he'd helped put me on, and for the trials that had ultimately unlocked my inner resilience. The road ahead was full of endless possibilities, each one sparkling with the promise of new adventures and experiences. And this time I had no intention of letting anyone or anything hold me back from seizing them. As for Brandon, well, he was firmly in my rearview mirror, just a speck of dust on the horizon. I'd purged his toxic influence from my life, and I was finally free to soar unencumbered. "My name is Ava Thompson, and I'm a woman reborn. Emily, is something wrong with the casserole?" Nora asked with a stiff smile, eyes glinting with something unspoken. "Oh no, it's unique," I said, trying to smile through the salt burning my tongue. "Max, have you ever had something like this?" Max looked up from his plate, his brow furrowed. "I haven't, but it's, definitely different." Nora's glare was cutting. She quickly turned her attention back to her plate. Silence hung over the table like a thick fog. I shifted in my seat, glancing at Max to see if he noticed. He chewed quietly, pretending everything was fine. My stomach churned, but not from the overly salty casserole. I took a deep breath and decided to try breaking the ice. "Nora, I've found this great recipe for chicken pot pie. Would you like to try it sometime?" Nora's eyes flicked to me. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of changing my recipes. They've been in the family for years." I bit back an automatic retort. "Sure, I understand. Just thought you might want to try something new." Max reached over and squeezed my hand under the table, trying to comfort me. I gave him a small smile, but the unease gnawed at my mind. As dinner dragged on, I could feel Nora's gaze burning into me every time I forced down another bite of her cooking. Later that night, Max and I were getting ready for bed. He slipped his arm around my waist, pulling me close. "You really don't have to eat Mom's cooking if you don't like it," he murmured into my ear. "I know, but I want to make a good impression. It's important for me to get along with her, for us." Max sighed and kissed the top of my head. "It's tough, isn't it?" "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it will get better." The next day at work, I threw myself into my projects. The marketing campaign I was leading was demanding, and it kept my mind off the previous night's dinner. But as the day wore on, a sense of dread began to build. There was another family dinner coming up. Back at home, I leafed through cookbooks and browsed recipes online. I knew I had to do something to smooth things over with Nora. It couldn't be this hard to find a middle ground, right? "You know, all my friends think it's weird we go to your parents' house so often," I chuckled later that evening as I showed Max a couple of new recipes. "Yeah, but it makes them happy," Max shrugged. "And I want to keep everyone happy." "Everyone?" I raised an eyebrow, teasing him. "Everyone, you included." "Well, if that's the case, maybe we can take a break and cook something here," I suggested. "Just a thought." Max smiled and kissed my forehead. "We'll see, but I do appreciate how hard you're trying." "Thanks." Days blurred into routines at work and uneasy dinners at Nora's house. Each time I felt the gap between us widening. Nora's passive-aggressive comments and her stubbornness built a wall I couldn't break through. So, I searched for advice, calling friends discreetly for tips on how to handle difficult in-laws. They offered sympathy and recipes, but nothing seemed to work with Nora. Still, I pressed on, hoping that one day Nora would accept me and things would finally get better. My days at the marketing firm kept me busy. I enjoyed the buzz of creativity and the hustle of meeting deadlines. It was a world where I felt confident and in control. But as soon as I stepped outside the office, the weight of Nora's scrutiny threatened to crush my every move. "Hey, Emily, how's it going with the in-laws?" asked Jenna, my colleague, as we grabbed lunch. "It's a work in progress," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "Nora's not the easiest person to get close to." Jenna laughed. "Just be yourself. Sooner or later, she'll come around." "Yeah, let's hope," I said, though doubt tingled at the edge of my mind. Max picked me up from work that evening. As we drove home, he glanced over. "Mom called. She wants us over for dinner again this weekend." "Again?" I sighed. "We just had dinner there 2 nights ago." "I know, but she insists," Max said, looking apologetic. "I told her we'd come." "All right," I said, trying to sound enthused but feeling a growing pit in my stomach. Back home, Max flipped through TV channels while I prepared the salad for dinner. As I chopped vegetables, my mind wandered, considering how best to approach Nora without causing a scene. "You okay, Em?" Max's voice broke through my thoughts. Yeah, just thinking." "About dinner with Mom?" "Yeah, I guess. I just wish it didn't feel like walking on eggshells." "I get it," he said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "But maybe this time will be different." Saturday came too quickly. We pulled up to Nora's house and the familiar dread washed over me. Inside, Nora greeted us with a tight smile, her eyes cold as she hugged Max tightly. "Dinner's almost ready," she announced, her tone lacking warmth. As we sat down, I tried to engage in small talk, asking about her garden and if she had any new projects in mind. Nora responded with curt answers, clearly uninterested. Max's father, Raymond, joined us at the table. He was always pleasant, his presence a buffer against the tension. "How's work, Emily?" he asked, his voice genuinely curious. "Busy, but good. We just launched a new campaign," I said, grateful for the distraction. "That's wonderful," Raymond smiled warmly. As dinner progressed, I noticed something strange. The food seemed intentionally oversalted again. My suspicion grew with each bite. "Nora, this stew is really something," I said, carefully neutral. Nora's lips tightened. "An old family recipe." Max took a bite and immediately reached for his water. "Wow, that's a strong flavor." Nora's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of something dark crossing her face. "Really? I followed the recipe exactly." Raymond seemed oblivious as he continued eating, but Max looked at me with concern. After dinner, I helped clear the table, Nora's silence weighing heavily in the room. "Thanks for dinner, Nora," I said, trying to soften the awkwardness. She didn't meet my eyes. "You're welcome." On the drive home, Max finally spoke. "What's going on between you and Mom?" "I don't know. It's like she's trying to push me away," I admitted. "I try so hard, Max, but nothing works." "We'll figure it out," he said firmly. "I promise." I leaned back, exhausted. "I hope so." As we pulled into our driveway, a thought struck me. Maybe this wasn't just about me. Maybe Nora had her reasons for her actions, and it was up to me to find out what they were. Whether it led to resolution or more conflict, one thing was certain: this wasn't over yet. "Emily, I have good news," Dr. Hastings announced as she entered the examination room. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is it?" She handed me a pamphlet with a smile. "Congratulations, Emily, you're pregnant." The words hit me like a tidal wave. Shock quickly morphed into joy, and I reached for my phone to call Max. "Max, you won't believe this. We're going to be parents." Max's reaction was immediate and ecstatic. "I'm going to be a dad," he exclaimed. "That's incredible, Emily." We met later that evening, his hands gently touching my stomach, eyes filled with wonder. "I can't believe it," he murmured. "We need to find the perfect way to tell our families." "We should wait a bit, just to be sure everything's okay," I suggested. "Maybe after the first trimester?" Max nodded. "You're right, but this is so exciting." That night, I lay awake, my mind racing. The thought of bringing a child into the world filled me with a mix of excitement and anxiety. How would Nora react? The idea of sharing the news with her sent a shiver down my spine. "Are you okay?" Max asked, noticing my restless state. "Yeah, just thinking about how everything will change," I said, trying to mask my concerns. The next morning, I began to take extra care with my diet, determined to ensure the best for our baby. I carefully prepared balanced meals, avoiding anything that might be harmful. However, the impending dinners at Nora's house loomed large in my mind. "Emily, you seem different lately," Nora commented during our next family dinner, her eyes scrutinizing me. I forced a smile. "Just busy with work, I guess." Are you sure that's all? Her tone was suspicious, almost accusatory. I met her gaze evenly. Positive. Dinner passed uneventfully, though Nora's eyes never left me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Nora, do you think we could maybe have some lighter meals? I've been feeling a bit off lately and thought it might help. Nora's eyes narrowed. You don't like my cooking, do you? No, it's not that, I said quickly. Just trying to take care of myself. Her lips curled into a tight smile. If you say so. The tension was palpable as we left. As soon as we were in the car, Max turned to me. What was that all about? I don't know, I sighed, but something feels off. The following weeks were a whirlwind of doctor appointments and careful planning. Every time we visited Nora, I found excuses to avoid her food. Each time, her suspicion grew. One evening, while browsing through books on pregnancy, I stumbled upon a worrying thought. What if the constant tension with Nora affected the baby? I knew I had to tread carefully. Emily, are you sure you're okay? Max asked again one night as I lay awake, unable to sleep. Yes, just worried, I admitted. About everything. He kissed my forehead. We'll get through this, Em. Together. As I drifted off to sleep, the uncertainty of our future loomed large, but so did the hope of a new beginning. Our lives were about to change forever, and I was determined to protect our growing family, no matter what it took. Dinner at Nora's house had never been more stressful. Now that I was pregnant, I had to be extra cautious about what I was eating. But how was I going to handle this without arousing Nora's suspicion even further? I thought about it all the way to the door. Raymond greeted us warmly as always. Come in, he said, ushering us inside. We made our way to the dining room, but my stomach churned, for different reasons this time. Max's touch on my arm was reassuring, but I knew tonight would not be easy. Nora placed a casserole on the table, her eyes flickering toward me with that now familiar edge. I hope you like it, Emily, she said, her voice dripping with saccharine politeness. I forced a smile and nodded. I'm sure I will, Nora. Thank you. We all sat down, and as the plates were passed around, I scooped a small portion onto mine, my mind racing for a plausible excuse to avoid eating it. Maybe I could claim I'd forgotten to take my prenatal vitamins and needed to take them with food from home where I knew I could control the ingredients. Halfway through the meal, it became clear Nora was watching my every move. I pushed the food around my plate, trying to make it look like I'd eaten more than I had. You barely touched your food, Emily, Nora said, her eyes narrowing. Is something wrong? No, it's just that. I hesitated. I've been feeling a bit queasy lately. Queasy, huh? Nora's suspicion seemed to deepen, and the room grew silent. Max intervened. Emily's just being careful with her diet, Mom. You know how it is. I see, Nora replied with a tight smile. Well, perhaps you should see a doctor if it continues. Oh, I've already been, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. It's nothing serious. As dinner wrapped up, I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment to breathe. The air felt suffocating, and as I splashed water on my face, I heard the door creak open. Emily? Nora's voice was ice cold. I turned, my pulse quickening. Yes, Nora. You don't like my cooking, do you? Her eyes bored into mine. It's not that, I started, but she cut me off. Don't lie to me. You've been avoiding my meals for weeks now. You're hiding something, she hissed. I felt my pulse quicken. I'm just trying to eat healthier for the baby. For the baby, she mimicked derisively. Well, we'll see about that. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me with a chilling sense of dread. I returned to the table, my hands trembling. Later that night, back at home, I tried to explain it all to Max. She knows something's up. She's getting more aggressive. Max looked troubled. Maybe we should stop eating there for a while, just until things calm down. I think that's a good idea, I agreed. I need to focus on the baby and avoid unnecessary stress. Absolutely, he said, hugging me tightly. We'll get through this together. As sleep finally claimed me that night, I knew the coming months would be challenging. Avoiding Nora and her increasingly vile behavior was only part of the battle. The other part was ensuring our child came into a world where he or she would be safe and loved, and for that, I was ready to do whatever it took. Remember, if anything feels off, we're leaving, Max said as we pulled up to his parents' house for yet another family dinner. I nodded, feeling a mix of anxiety and resolve. Raymond opened the door with his usual warmth. Come in, it's great to see you both. As we stepped inside, Nora appeared from the kitchen, her face perfectly composed. "Dinner's almost ready," she announced, her eyes briefly meeting mine before sliding away. Seated at the table, I tried to steady my nerves. The food looked as presentable as always, but I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion. "Dinner's served," Nora said with too much enthusiasm, placing an elaborate dish in front of us. I poked at the food, and out of the corner of my eye I noticed a strange odor. My instinct shouted a warning. "Max, can we swap plates?" I whispered. "Why?" he asked, looking puzzled. "Just, can we?" I insisted, my voice barely above a whisper. He frowned but complied. As the plate trading was happening, Nora's eyes widened in alarm. "Max, no, that piece is spoiled," she shrieked. The room froze. Raymond's fork clattered onto his plate. Max stared at his mother in disbelief. "Mom, what are you talking about?" A cold chill ran down my spine. "You fed me expired food on purpose?" My voice was filled with disbelief and hurt. Nora's expression hardened. "She's not really family," she spat out, the venom in her voice unmistakable. Max's face went pale. "Mom, how could you?" he demanded, his voice shaking with anger. Raymond looked stunned, struggling to find words. "Nora, what have you done?" Nora crossed her arms defiantly. "I did what I had to. She doesn't belong here." The room felt like it was closing in around us. I stood up, my legs trembling, but firm in my decision. "I can't believe you would stoop so low, Nora. You put my health and our baby's health at risk." Max stood beside me, his anger now controlled but intense. "We're leaving. Come on, Emily." As we turned to go, Nora called out, "You can't take my son away from me." Max turned back, his face set in granite. "You did this, Mom. You drove us away." Raymond got up and walked toward us, his face filled with sorrow and apology. "I'm truly sorry, Emily. I had no idea." I nodded, tears blurring my vision. "Thank you, Raymond." Finally, we walked out the door and stepped into the cool night air. My heart pounded, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. Driving home, Max reached over and took my hand. "We did the right thing, Emily. We need to protect our family." I nodded, grateful for his support. "Thank you for standing by me." "We're in this together," he said firmly. Back home, I settled into bed, still shaken by the evening's events. Max lay beside me, his presence a constant comfort. Despite the turmoil, a sense of relief washed over me. We had faced Nora's true colors, and now we could move forward, prioritizing our safety and well-being. As I drifted off to sleep, one thought resonated. I would do anything to protect our baby, and no one, not even Nora, would stand in my way. The confrontation with Nora left us shaken, but determined. The decision was clear. We had to confront her and make sure she understood the gravity of what she had done. The following morning, Max and I invited Raymond to our house to plan the confrontation. Raymond arrived, looking weary but resolved. "I'm still in shock," he said, shaking his head. Nora's behavior was reprehensible. "I agree," Max said, his voice composed but filled with steely determination. "We need to confront her together, as a family, and let her know that we won't tolerate this." I nodded. It's important for her to face the consequences. We arranged to meet at Nora's house later that afternoon. Max drove, his grip on the wheel tight. I sat beside him, replaying the incident in my mind, trying to muster the strength for what was to come. Raymond followed in his car, his expression grim. As we approached the house, the atmosphere felt heavy with tension. Max knocked on the door, and Nora opened it, her face a mix of surprise and defiance. "Can we come in?" Max asked, his tone brooking no argument. Nora stepped aside reluctantly. We walked into the living room, settling on the couch. The air was thick with unspoken words. "What is this about?" Nora asked, crossing her arms. Max didn't waste time. "Mom, we're here to talk about what happened last night." "That was a misunderstanding," Nora said quickly, her eyes flashing defensively. "No, it wasn't," Max countered, his voice firm, unyielding. "You put Emily's health and our baby's health at risk. There's no misunderstanding about that." Raymond interjected, his voice calm but forceful. "Nora, I've supported you for years, but what you did was dangerous and cruel. We need answers." Nora's bravado faltered. "I did it because I don't trust her," she said, pointing at me. "She's not good enough for you, Max." My anger flared. "How can you say that? What I've done to deserve this treatment?" "You've taken my son away," Nora snapped, her voice rising. "He spends more time with you than with his own family." "Emily is my family now," Max said, stepping closer to his mother, "and you need to accept that." Nora looked stricken. So you're choosing her over me? I'm choosing to protect my wife and child, Max said firmly. And until you can respect that, we won't be coming back. Raymond stood beside Max, his expression resolute. Until you change, Nora, you'll have to face the consequences of your actions alone. Tears welled in Nora's eyes, but her expression remained defiant. You're all against me. No, I said softly. You did this to yourself. Max turned to me. Emily, let's go. We walked out of the house together, leaving Nora standing there, a solitary figure in the doorway. The finality of our actions weighed heavily, but it was necessary. As we drove away, a sense of relief washed over me. Max reached for my hand, his grip reassuring. I'm sorry it came to this, but we made the right choice. I know, I said, looking out at the passing scenery. Now we can focus on our future without the shadow of her toxicity. Raymond followed us back, silent and reflective. When we arrived, he finally spoke. I'll do what I can to help Nora see the error of her ways. But for now, ensure your safety and well-being. Thank you, Raymond, I said, feeling grateful for his support. We appreciate it more than you know. Max and I watched as Raymond drove away, the burden of recent events lessening with each moment. As we stood together, I knew whatever lay ahead, we could face it together, stronger and more united than ever. Packing up our home felt surreal. Boxes stacked high with our belongings, the walls bare and empty. It was a fresh start we desperately needed, but it still felt strange to leave behind so many memories. Max taped up the last box and turned to me. You ready? As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, taking his hand. This is our new beginning. We loaded the boxes into the car, and I glanced back at our house one last time. It's hard to believe we're moving on, I said softly. Max nodded. But it's necessary. Raymond stood by the car, his face somber. You two take care of each other. I'll help Nora see reason, but I can't guarantee anything. Thank you, Raymond, I said, hugging him. We appreciate everything you've done. We drove away, the road stretching out in front of us like a promise. As we reached the outskirts of town, Max sighed. This is it, a new chapter. Yes, I agreed, squeezing his hand, and it's going to be a good one. It wasn't long before we settled into our new home, a cozy place far from Nora's reach. The change of scenery brought a sense of peace and safety that had been missing for too long. One evening, Max was reading in the living room when his phone rang. He checked the caller ID and frowned. It's my mom, he said, his voice filled with hesitation. I looked up from my book. Answer it. Max picked up the phone. Hello, Mom. Nora's voice was strained. Max, I'm sorry. Please come back. We miss you. Max looked at me, torn. Mom, it's not that simple. I know I made mistakes, she said, her voice cracking, but I want to make things right. He took a deep breath. We need time, Mom. Time to heal and adjust. You can't cut me out forever. That, she pleaded. You're my son. I'm not cutting you out, but you need to understand the damage you caused, Max replied, his voice firm. We need to protect our family. Our family, she echoed bitterly. So she's more important than your own mother? Emily is my family now, too, he said patiently, and I won't let anyone hurt her, not even you. Nora's voice grew icy. You'll regret this. Max's face hardened. I don't think we will. Goodbye, Mom. He hung up the phone and let out a deep sigh. I can't believe how manipulative she can be. I walked over and hugged him. We did what we had to do. I know, he said, his voice heavy with emotion, but it doesn't make it any easier. Weeks passed, and our lives settled into a new routine. The peace was occasionally disrupted by attempts from Nora to reach out, but we maintained our distance. One afternoon, Raymond visited us. His face was etched with sadness. Nora's refusing to accept responsibility, he said, sitting down. She remains adamant that she did nothing wrong. I'm so sorry, Raymond, I said softly. This can't be easy for you. It isn't, he admitted, but I need to support you and Max. You made the right choice for your family. In the months that followed, Nora's attempts to contact us grew less frequent. It seemed she was finally beginning to understand the consequences of her actions. We continued to focus on building our lives, embracing the joy of our growing family. One evening, as we watched the sunset from our porch, Max took my hand and smiled. We've been through so much, but I wouldn't change a thing. It's made us stronger. I rested my head on his shoulder. You're right, and we have so much to look forward to. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the future felt bright and full of promise. We had faced the darkness and come out stronger, ready to embrace whatever came next. Our new life took root in ways I could have never imagined. Nearly 2 years had passed since we moved, and although the memories of Nora's malice lingered, they no longer had power over us. Max lifted our daughter, Claire, into the air, making her giggle uncontrollably. "Our little girl is growing up so fast," he said, smiling. I watched them with a warmth in my heart. "She is, and she's safe and happy. That's all that matters." Claire clapped her hands, signaling she wanted to be swung around again. Max obliged, and the sound of her laughter filled the room. It was the kind of joy that marked a fresh start, devoid of the darkness from before. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Max's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression turning serious. "It's Nora," he said, his voice neutral. "She still tries?" I asked, shaken by the thought of her reaching out yet again. Max nodded. "This is the first time she's called in months." "Answer it," I said quietly. "Let's see what she has to say." Max took a deep breath and accepted the call, putting it on speaker. "Max, it's Nora." Her voice came through, strained and tentative. "I miss you all terribly. Please, can we talk?" Max remained calm. "What is there to talk about, Mom?" "I know I did wrong," her voice cracked. "But I'm truly sorry. I can't bear the thought of missing more of Claire's life. Please, I want to make amends." I picked Claire up and began to rock her gently, steadying my own feelings. "Why should we believe you now after everything you did?" Max asked. "Because I've had time to reflect," she replied, desperation creeping into her voice. "I realize now how much I pushed you away. I see the harm I caused." "We needed you to see that before, but you didn't listen," Max said. "I know, and I can't take it back," Nora said, her tone pleading. "But please, give me a chance to prove I've changed." I took the phone from Max. "Nora, your actions put my health and Claire's health at risk. How can we trust you?" A heavy silence followed. "I understand your hesitation," Nora finally said, "but I'm asking for one last chance. If not for me, then for Claire. She deserves to know her grandmother." Max and I exchanged glances. I could see the conflict in his eyes, his compassion wrestling with the betrayal we'd suffered. "I'll think about it," I said bluntly, "but this isn't something that can be mended overnight." "Thank you," Nora said, her voice breaking. "That's all I ask." Max hung up and sighed deeply. "That was unexpected." "It was," I agreed, my mind swirling with emotions. "But we're not rushing into anything." In the days that followed, we continued our routine, the call from Nora a lingering background noise. One afternoon, Max and I sat down to discuss it further. "Do you think she really means it?" I asked. "I hope so," Max said. "I want Claire to have her grandma, but not at the expense of our safety and peace." "I'm not willing to risk that either," I said firmly. "If we do let her back into our lives, it will be on our terms." Max nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. We've been through too much to let her hurt us again." The decision loomed over us, but we knew it was one we had to make together. For now, our focus remained on creating a loving, stable environment for Claire. As I watched Max play with Claire, their laughter a soothing melody, I knew we had made the right choices to protect our family, and whatever the future held, we would face it together, stronger and more united than ever.